Start the session. As you all know, this course is being offered at Indians of Science since last 18 years. This is the 19th batch. And probably some of you are very young when I started writing this course material. And today it has become a really got into the various institutions, for the undergraduate program as well as for the postgraduate program. My books were being used as a reference material. And that is where, if you learn this concept, there's another option is you can also become a guest faculty in this domain. Guest faculty in various institutions, because there are hardly few people who are expertise in the environment. If you pick up this, and then I'm sure you can also do the work, and parallelly you can also become a guest faculty in various institutions. This is the subject, keeps everyone happy. If you take the subject seriously, I'm sure you'll never have unhappiness in your life. The way we work, the way we have been working, if you look at it, in fact, all my colleagues, my students and the project, the staff, they all work almost 10 to 12 hours a day. That is because their passion in the environment sector and their eagerness to contribute something to the nation through the environment sector. And we are trying to enhance the literacy among the people through this domain. Okay, the environmental management, if the course module consists of 10 chapters and there are case studies, during the first session, that is now, we will take up the discussion of all the 10 chapters. Okay, and you are going to do the presentation of 5 chapters on the 3rd or 4th day of the course. Then during September to November, that is after this week, when we meet in the 3rd week, we will have the E-session. I will discuss about the E-session, how we'll work it out in a few minutes from now. See, what we plan to do during the E-session is, sometime during the week, maybe the Wednesday and Thursday, between 7 and 8:30, we will access the portal and we will have the chat session. And also I will identify the coordinators to coordinate the session. That means during this program, you will become the teacher. You will also coordinate the session. And when you come back in the month of December, I will make you the chair. So that means this is a one course where you are a student and you will also be a teacher and you will also become a chair. So that is how we do the capacity building, especially the youngsters who have just graduated. When they become a chair of the session, that too at the Indians of Science, they get a lot of ideas, and that's how they move forward in their professional careers also. Then we'll also have the guest lectures. Now that is where I spend few minutes to find out what is your background and what is your professional domain, so that we will try to have the guest lecture to suit your requirements. In case at any point of time, if you feel that we have left out some domain, you can write to me that I'll arrange that guest lectures either during the September November session or during the December session when we meet. Then when you come back in December, during September to November, we will interact every week between 7 to 8:30. That is E-session. Okay. Then when you come back in December, we will have presentation of 10 chapters. That means the entire the course you will be presenting. I will identify the people, the group who will take up the chapters. So I will divide this group. There are about 20 candidates are there. We didn't take the big number because through the virtual classroom, it's very difficult to handle the more than the 20 or 25. That's where we have kept the cap on the number of candidates who can register for the course. The group is small. That means for every 2%, one chapter is assigned. They will they coordinate the session during September to November on that chapter. And also when they come back in December, they will prepare the PPT slides and they will do the presentation along with the case study. If there are two persons, one can they focus on the content of the chapter, the second one can focus on the, the case studies. So that we will discuss it as we progress in the course. Okay. Then there will be a small project also, which is you can take up the live project. So based on your area of interest, so those who are interested in solid waste management with a civil engineering background, I might assign the project how to handle the building debris. Though there is a government of India, there is a norm on the solid waste management, especially the building waste. Unfortunately, that is not put into the practice. There is a gap in that domain. So maybe I will take advantage of the people with a civil engineering background like Raja Aditya, for example, with the IWSM, solid waste management idea. So he can take that idea forward. So when you come back in December, you will do the presentation of the chapters, and also you will do the project presentation, and you will submit the project report also. The project report, I had shared the details of the course. If you go through that, there's somewhere at the end of that document, I have given the template of the project report also. So you can submit the e-version of the project report. There is no need for a hard copy unless you feel that your copy of the dissertation has to be archived in our library. Then only you can give that a hard copy. But otherwise, we are comfortable with the e-version. And then we'll have the final exam. That means when we end this session, we will have one exam, that is a midterm exam. Then in December, we'll have the final exam. The idea of examination is not to burden you. The examination is to assess how far you have understood the concept, because this is one course where we have not done any kind of advertisement. We have just posted on the web, and all of you have taken the course out of your own interest. That means the people with interest have come to the course. My feeling is that they will learn the subject and become a professional in this domain. And as far as this course is concerned, I have listed the chapters. These are all in a book entitled Environmental Management, authored by me and Vijay Kulkarni. This was written about 10 years back. Okay. And when you look at the marks of the course, the assignment and attendance carries 20 marks. I will take attendance, randomly. You will not know when I will take attendance. So that means one has to be attending the session. So, and I have requested everyone to make sure that they attend the session, because that carries about 20 marks. Okay. Then examination, there are two examinations, midterm and final exam, which will carry 30 marks. Then when you come back in December, you see that session will decide your career. The 50 marks is there. See, here you will get through in the midterm and the assignment, etc. That means there won't be any failure in the course. So far, I have not refused anyone getting the certificate. But only the thing is, the December will decide whether you will get A grade or A plus or B grade kind of a thing. So that is where, if you do well in December, then and this certificate, unlike other course certificates, it will also carry marks. It will carry the grades. So that is where it will help you in your professional career. Certainly a certificate from Iisc for people working in industries, it has helped in getting the additional incentives in their institution, and also for some of the people to change their path. For example, there were people from the AG's office, auditor's office. Then after taking this course, they become environmental auditors. Now today they are in the other countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and such countries as environmental auditors. That's how this course helps in professional career building. The uniqueness of this course is we will have summary at regular intervals, and you will not know whom I will ask to summarize. So, and at that time, my request to you is not to give excuse of saying that internet is not okay and there are other problems, there's some computer is not working, all those things. Please make sure everything works, including your brain, okay? So that you could answer the questions, where you could summarize the thing, and sometimes we might even ask you the questions also, okay? Then that is the assignment. Assignment will also include chapter relevant questions, which is announced at each end of each class. Okay, and you will prepare the PPT slides. Okay, that is what we discussed about the chapters. And when you come back in December, those PPT slides will help. So when you prepare PPT slides of each chapter, immediately along with the course, the advantage is that suppose tomorrow if you become a guest faculty somewhere, you can use those PPT slides. And also when you do the presentation, when I give the suggestion, when the resource persons give the suggestion, probably you can use that as a template for your lectures in the subsequent career. Okay, then I will be announcing the project most probably on the 5th or 6th September. Depending, today I have noted down your background and I will work on that and I will come up with the kind of the topic you are likely to work on. Okay. Now, if you look at this journey, somewhere in the way back in 2000, the Commonwealth of Learning came up with an idea to develop the modules in environmental engineering, essentially to do the capacity building of the people working in the industries and the in-service professionals. That means the people working in institutions and industries and organizations. That is where we did the need assessment. These are the 5 modules we developed. One is on solid waste management. The second is environmental management. The third module is air pollution control. The fourth one is water and wastewater treatment. Then the fifth one is soil and groundwater pollution. All these modules we have published as a book. This was published initially by Capital Publishing Company in 2004. Subsequently, Terry Press approached me and they have taken over the publication in 2006 or 2007. They came out with a print version. So that's where we had we have the copy, the book in the print version. Now, the first book, Solid Waste Management and Environmental Management and the Soil and Groundwater Pollution, are authored by me, while the air pollution control was done by Professor Mahajan from IIT Mumbai. Then water and wastewater treatment was done by Rakesh Kumar and R.N. Singh of NEERI, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. And all myself, my colleagues, we have the vast experience in this domain. That is where we have tried to take our knowledge to this through the book, and we are trying to help the society through the capacity building. And after the writing the book, we also did a pilot testing. We had a pilot testing also. While writing the book, we had the review committee. That means each chapter as and when was written, it was reviewed by a group of experts and all those suggestions were implemented. And after developing this as a book, we had a pilot testing with a select faculty from various education institutions. Then their suggestions were also implemented. So that means we had undergone the 2 stages of verification. Then after that, from 2003, I have been offering these courses at IISc. Sometime I have done solid waste management as a part of AICTE course when we got the funding from AICTE for the university faculty as per the municipal solid waste rule of Government of India. While the environmental management course I have been offering it from IISc, there is no one has asked us to offer the course out of my interest and in the keen interest to enhance the knowledge in the society. I have been offering this course myself. My students and my colleagues are actually involved in this one. And of course, the other 3 modules are available in the form of the book, which has gone into the undergraduate and postgraduate courses. People are using this as a reference material. Okay, when you look at this course on environmental management, we have 10 chapters. When you purchase that book, which is available at Terry Press, so you will see that book has the 10 chapters. The first chapter, I will introduce you to the management of environment. I will talk about ecosystem, environment, and what is the difference between ecosystem and environment, and why to manage the environment, and how to manage. I will discuss that in the first chapter. The second chapter, I will talk about the policy and legal aspects of the environment. What are the rules that are there in the country, and where are the gaps? Sometime when you listen to me, you will also see that how those gaps have to be filled. Okay. Then the third and fourth chapter is on the environmental impact assessment. See, when you come up with a new project, the project, whether it's a township or an industry or laying a railway track, you need to have the assessment of the impact of the environment. We will talk about how that idea emerged, how to do the environmental impact assessment, then what is the documentation process involved, and how to get EIA clearance from the government. We will discuss that in the third and fourth chapter. This will be presented by Sinsi Varghese and the Asulaba. The fourth chapter would be presented by Asulaba. Then the fifth chapter is on auditing. Unlike the third and fourth chapter, that is before you start the project, you will find out what is the environmental impact. While the auditing is when the project is functional, you are supposed to get the consent for continued operation from Karnataka State Pollution Control Board or any regional pollution control board. In that case, every industry or institution has to submit the environmental auditing report to the respective regions, the pollution control board. In that case, how to do the auditing within an industry and what are the parameters to be captured, we will discuss that in the fifth chapter. That would be presented by Dr. Bharat Setcho. Then the next chapter is on the life cycle assessment, wherein we will talk about the product. When you manufacture a product, what are the environmental loading associated with the product? How to capture that or how to quantify that environmental loading, we will discuss in the chapter, the sixth chapter, which would be presented by Saranya, who has worked on biofuel, and also she has written an article on LCA of biofuel also. So that she might suggest you to go through that this one as a reference material, as a case study for LCA. Now, to the comparatively, if you look at EIA is before you start the journey to set up an industry, you need to look at what are the impacts. Environmental auditing is when you are starting when you started the industry to continue the production every year, you need to have prior consent from the pollution control board. That is where you submit the environmental audit report to the control board. Then LCA, it is like this course. You are doing this course because you want to have the better career, the better job prospects or career. Similarly, LCA is done for a product by industry to get a better market return. You would have seen that ISO certified product. These are all the certification. How to do the certification, we will discuss that in the seventh chapter. The concept of environmental management system standards, we will discuss in the seventh chapter. This will be presented by the Dr. Vinay, who did a PhD at IISc. Then he did a postdoctoral fellowship at IIT Kharagpur, and then he moved to the Warangal University. Now he is engineering the division, the faculty at the engineering college. Okay, so then we will move to the next chapter on environmental monitoring. The environmental monitoring is the 8th chapter, which will be presented by Dr. Bharat Aital, who is a faculty at IIT Kharagpur. He will be discussing the 8th chapter, and case studies might be presented by the Dr. Bharat Setcho. So then the 9th chapter would be presented again by Dr. Vinay, who will talk about environmental friendly design. Some of you would have worked in the environmental friendly design and the concept of environmental design. Probably the Nayana can give more input also when we take up the discussion on that chapter. Then the 10th chapter is on environmental economics. This is the emerging area. Now the many countries are working on natural capital accounting and valuation ecosystem goods and services. Now, as far as Karnataka is concerned, we are in the forefront because just now we completed the natural capital accounting and valuation ecosystem goods and services for the entire Karnataka. Now we know what is the worth of the natural capital in Karnataka. The similar work, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is planning to replicate in various districts in the country. There are about 80 districts have been chosen for that. In case some of the youngsters are looking for a job, if they have learned this concept, they can get into that the project also and can implement those ideas there. Okay, this is how the relevance of this course, and that's where each chapter stands uniquely distinct and has its own relevance. depending on this chapter, you can have your expertise. Now, if you look at the course, the fee, I have charged a very small amount that is only to meet the running expenses. But if you look at the way it is being offered by the consultant, for each module, they would charge 20 to 25,000. In fact, in one consultant company in Bangalore, who offers the course on environmental auditing and life cycle assessment, they charge about 40,000. So that is how, if you understand the concept, you can also become a consultant, or you can start a consultant firm. You can also do this kind of courses, and also you can become an auditor for the industry. So now with this background, let's move to the chapter 1, the principles of environmental and natural resources management. So we will, I will start the session on the first chapter now. If you have any question, you can ask for now. Otherwise, I'll move to the first chapter. The principles of environmental and natural resources management. So now when you look at the nature, in every grain of sand, there is a story of earth. Now, when you look at the sand or the soil particle, it has taken millions of years for the generation of soil. Then, with the nutrient content, how we produce the food and how we have the thing. So that means the entire journey from the earth, from the food to the. Now, in this chapter, I will introduce you to the concept of environmental management. Then the fundamentals of environmental management. I will take up the linkages like population and limits to growth, need for sustainable development. Some of you have used the term, the sustainability or sustainable development. We'll try to understand that. Then how to do the environmental management, what are the approaches we will discuss. Then we will get into the core concept of ecology and environment. What is ecology? How it is linked with the environment? We will discuss that. With the wherein I'll introduce you to the structure of an ecosystem, food chain, food web, and trophic level. This you would have studied during your school days. There you would have scored. Then after that, you would have forgotten also. Let us try to understand this concept better now. Then we will talk about restoration and recovery. If the ecosystem is degraded, then how to restore it? Is there a hope in the system? We will discuss that. Then if we don't do it, how that impact? The imbalances will affect us in the terms of resource availability, etc. We will discuss that. I will enrich this content also with the case studies when I take up the case studies. Okay. Then I will list the environmental management tools, what we use for managing the environment. It could be EIA, environmental auditing, LCA, etc. Briefly, I will talk about it in this chapter. Then we will discuss who are the participants in environmental management. All of us are participants in environmental management as a public, as an expert, as the bureaucrats. We are the part of the system. We've become a stakeholders in environmental management. Then we will talk about ethics and the environment. Then finally, I will talk about what are the concerns in India and how to address those concerns. And the concluding part, I will just summarize the chapter. Okay. This chapter should take about 1.5 to 2 hours to do the presentation. Now we will take up this one. See, the objective of this chapter is to understand what is environmental management. That is where we will explain the meaning of environmental management. Then we will discuss the action taken at international and national level for environmental protection. Then we identify a range of environmental management approaches and tools, and explain the role of professionals in environmental management. That is our objective. See, those of you who have gone through the textbook written by us, you would have noticed that the content is written in the self-learning format, which means that if you read the textbook, you will get a feel that the teacher is explaining you behind you. So that means you will learn by going through the textbook without a teacher. That is where this kind of the course material suitable for open distance learning were developed way back in 2000. That is the time the ODL or open distance learning people have started talking about globally and also in India. And today, of course, we have come up with the programs. Now, this course module is also used in the Karnataka State Open University For example, solid waste management and environmental management. And Indira Gandhi Open University also, there was a course was offered based on this. And the director of Indira Gandhi Open University was a member of that review committee also. So now when we talk about environmental management, we know that it encompasses almost all the subjects. See, it has the ecology, economics, the people, the politics, then the management and law. So when you say that you have done the course, you have actually done a course which is multidisciplinary. So that means you will get a flavor of all the disciplines, and based on your basic degree and by interest, you can they expand your career. So when we talk about environment, see, we all think globally, but act locally. See, every action what we take up at local level has the implication at global level. See, when you burn a fuel, you might think that, okay, you have reached a destination by burning the fuel. But what happens is burning of the fuel will also lead to the emission, which will lead to the warming of the earth. That we will take it up when I take up the case study. So as far as today's presentation is concerned, every action at local level has the ramification at global level. So then the warming of the earth happens. That is where we have seen the temperature increasing globally, and consequences of global warming are the changes in climate. So you'll see that how Bangalore, Delhi, and many part of India face the changes in climate. See the flooding in Delhi now, or Uttarakhand landslides, or the high intensity rainfall, or in Western Ghats high intensity rainfall coupled with a landslide and leading to the large scale mortality. These are all the consequences of changes in climate. Because of our action, we do not know who are the victims. Sometimes we become irresponsible, and also we end up paying the price for that. So now when you look at the the environmental issues, one of the things people talk about is the population increase. Now, as you all know that, the India is a 1.3 billion population, or 130 crores. The globally 7.89 billion is the population as on September 5th. That is 2 days from now. The prediction says that 7.89 billion, and it is projected to increase to 10 or 11 billion by 2042, which is about 50%, will require about 43 years. Okay. It is also understood that the population grows, as the population grows, the rate of consumption of natural resources and rate of waste production increases. Now, when you look at the country, some of you would have traveled in the rural area, some of you would have traveled in the urban area. You would see that how irresponsible the urban population is. The wastage of the natural resources, the irresponsible or arrogant behavior of the mismanaging the resource, you would see in the urban population. Whereas when you go to the rural area, you hardly see the waste heap. But when you come to the city or the town, you will see the heaps of waste, and most of the heaps are covered, completely consists of the plastic. When you use plastic, which are not assimilated by nature, naturally it becomes the waste dump, and it also becomes a source for a disease vector. Wherever waste dumps are there, you see higher instances of chikungunya or dengue. For example, if you look at Kerala and some part of Bangalore, higher instances of the vector-borne diseases like dengue or chikungunya is because of the waste mismanagement. That is where it gave a room for the vectors to breed and proliferate, and then you saw that through that the diseases spread to the various sections of the society. So now, unfortunately, to add on to this, environment is also changing due to human activities, leading to such problems as soil erosion, floods, drought, climate changes, desertification, and general degradation of environment. So you would have noticed how the landslide or mudslide happened in Karnataka last week. High intensity rainfall. See, if you see any region, rain is supposed to spread about 40 to 45 days, or 3 or 4 months in Kerala. But instead of the rain coming throughout that period, if it falls in 1 or 2 days, then you will see high quantum of rainfall in a shorter duration, and that is where the flooding happens. When the flooding happens, you will see that the landslides and mudslides also do happen. Okay. Then of course, soil erosion is another problem associated with that. And you would have noticed the flooding happened and subsequently the people didn't have the water. For example, last year, the flooding happened in Kerala and Karnataka. Very next month, the wells and streams in this region also went dry. That is mainly because the catchment had lost its ability to retain the water. When we take up the hydrological cycle, we will try to understand how these various components of the hydrological cycle do function. Okay. Now, if we do not respect Mother Nature, what are the implications? Let us try to understand the ecological disaster. Now, to give an example, let us go to the Easter Island. People thought that land is available. They went on expanding the island. There were statues which are on the boundary of the thing. They also shifted the statues to the resort. They thought that land is available, they can accommodate people. But unfortunately, the availability of natural resources became a deciding factor. Because the water was not available, people have to vacate this island. So the death of island happened with that. So that is how, the unplanned urbanization or a mismanagement of resources lead to the death of a region. So then the another example is the last leg of Vijayanagara kingdom. If you look at the history book, you will understand the last phase of Vijayanagara kingdom failed because of the water scarcity. That means if the water is going to be a decisive factor in the survival of the kingdom or the regime in the region. So that's where one need to give importance to the ensuring the sustenance of natural resources, especially the water and energy, etc. Okay. Now let us look at the driving force for sustainable development. You all know what is sustainable development. If I ensure continuity of resources, natural resources for the next generation, it means I have ensured the sustainability. To do that, I need to do the planning, and that development is called sustainable development. Now, what are the factors are the driving force that has to be considered in planning for sustainable development? One is population growth. You need to keep in mind how the population is increased or the decreasing in the region. Then the rapid degradation of the environment with pollution or the mismanagement of the resources. Then the third is the resource depletion, water, fuel, food, land, etc. Then we have the unfortunate and uncontrollable natural disturbance. For example, if you look at Karnataka, you might think Karnataka is a prosperous or a progressive state, but if you look at the way the land is being degraded, so the Karnataka has a distinction of becoming a desert next to Rajasthan. Some of the districts in arid area like Kolar already have the unproductive or a barren area to an extent of about 35 to 50%. So this is quite worrying. This also highlights that during the last 5 or 6 decades, we have mismanaged the land resources. That's where we have made them unproductive. Okay. Then other consequences are acid rain, desertification, destruction of species, then the greenhouse modification, because of greenhouse gases, then ozone layer depletion, and the line continues. When you want rain, if it doesn't rain, when you don't want rain, if it rains, it is not going to serve the humans, or the society. So now let us understand what is environmental management. Environmental management is the process of allocating natural and man-made resources so as to make optimum use of the environment in satisfying not only the present basic human needs, but also of the future generation. That means when we plan the resources management, we also ensure the continuity of the resources. We will never plan the resources which will hamper the availability of resources for the future generation. But unfortunately, the most of the planners today in the country and globally, they are only interested in looting the resources for themselves. And that's where we have the imbalances in the system. That is where the knowledge of this kind of subject will help you in understanding the implication and also question the system and if possible intervene in the system to ensure the sustainability is maintained in the system. So if you are talking about sustainable development and ensuring the continuity of resources, you need to do the planning. It involves the environmental planning, conservation of resources, environmental status evaluation, environmental legislation and administration. You need to have appropriate environmental legislations also to plug the gaps in the system. Say, for example, in Bangalore, the lakes are there. Lakes are being encroached. There are the gaps in the legislation. Now, over the last 10 years, we were able to identify the gaps, and through the Green Tribunal and Supreme Court, we have tried to plug in the gaps. That is where there are some actions are taken on the looters. For a first time in the country, a builder who encroached a lake in Bangalore was charged 149 crores, based on our study report. So he has to pay the 149 crores. So, the people, when they have these buildings, they talk about development, the country, they talk about development, but actually, if you look at, they are misguiding the society in the name of development. They are looting the resources. They have a hands in glove with the mafias, and that's where, they are also part of the mafia. That is where we see the nexus of consultants, contractors, and politicians are threatening the sustenance of natural resources in the country and also in many parts of the globe. The focus of environmental management, hence, is on implementation, monitoring, and auditing on practice and coping with real-world issues rather than theoretical planning. In fact, when we take up these case studies, we will talk about real-world issues. I have been working many aspects in the country. We have worked on the Western Ghats. We have identified the ecologically vulnerable regions in the Western Ghats. We have also highlighted the linkages between the vegetation and the water availability. So theoretically, we have talked about it. Practically, we have demonstrated through creating the mini forest. We have shown whether the water is available or not available. When I take up the case study, I will highlight that. Okay. So now, let us look at some of the definition of environmental management. Environmental management is one second. So how to close for it? This one. Okay. Some of the definition of environmental management are the process of allocating natural and artificial resources so as to make optimum use of the environment in satisfying the basic human needs at the minimum and more if possible on a sustainable basis. Now, when you look at this, we are talking about optimal use of the resources. We never said that don't use it. We said you optimally use the resources. That is where judicious use of resources will ensure the continuity of the availability of resources. Then the next definition, a generic description of a process undertaken by a system-oriented professionals with a natural science, social science, or less commonly an engineering, law, or design background, tackling problems of the human altered environment on an interdisciplinary basis from a quantitative and or futuristic viewpoint. That's how we have designed this four chapters also. We are going to discuss how quantitatively estimate the environmental the goods and the services and how it helps in the managing the resources.
Professor, sorry to interrupt. This is Mahesh here.
Yeah, please.
Can I have one question? See, in the definition, just one slide before, this is my view. I don't know. I think somebody would have defined. This is the human needs at a minimum and more if possible. In the present prevailing conditions, I don't think it is possible for the more. Even definition itself, I think whether it is on the higher side, better what I feel is this more should not be there in the definition. Because of the population growing, the population growth itself is the fundamental reason of which we are, spoiling the environment. So this more may be correct.
I
still
understood,
doubt.
Mr. Mahesh. See, actually, I would say I have done a studies across the country in the various states. Okay.
Yeah.
According to my opinion, population is not an issue. People always blame population as the reason for the resource non-availability. It is mainly because the way we consume the resources. For example, in Bangalore, there are the cluster of population where the availability of water is only 30 liters or 40 liters per family per day. Whereas at the same time, you would see the section of the society having access to the water 400 to 500 liters per person per day. So now,
Yeah.
the consumption of the resources is this one. See, that's where a
That is what where the human behavior.
yeah. See, that is where,
That,
if you look at the human, see, what we are getting 30 to 40 liters per family. If we can
yeah,
get slightly more, we can run our family in a better way. I'm
yeah,
not saying
yeah.
the wastage of the resources. So unfortunately, every time when people talk about it, no, they say that it is because of the population. For example, when we talk about deforestation or the forest degradation, the first
Yeah.
and foremost thing people say is because the rural people, the people who are in rural area use fuel wood, there is a degradation of the forest. But I have demonstrated through a case study that in a district rich in forest, where the fuel wood sources for resources looted by this bureaucracy about basic human needs, it means if they are maintaining the sustainability, okay?
Fine, sir.
Character, it is often supports us humans. See, when there are no and the implication go to some countries where the water is not available, importance of the water. Right in the country, they understand the importance situation. But before that, if we can manage, probably we are also solving it. Demands see the environment management from through the engineers. Everyone are the holders of the current management. We never we it seeks to integrate policy make. It recognizes the desirability extends beyond the short term to global. Some of our action at local level and some of the also we will address. It should show towards it than rather than we talk about resources or how to optimally so that we also maybe with this we will take a small break. We'll come back break at the 10:30. There are questions, then we will
I just had one point to add here. Here, like the need for environment.
only with the stewardship that beyond the carrying capacity. The
Yes, thank you.
Sir,
steward what is handles the thing efficiently. Doing the resources will not allow the over exploitation. So that's where that prudent management, the stewardship.
I have one question. The
The textbook, exactly.
okay, it's on delivery.
Same thing I have. And when you prepare the slides, what I'm doing forward in this one, your presentation. Okay?
Thank you,
And
sir.
I share this video itself, recorded slides plus my audio. And
Yes.
And including now let's environmental problems, then prevention, and then talk about, if I take up the solid waste management, and then so that minimize the environmental problem associated with the mismanagement. Then the next is establishing limits. That's where we say that the pollution level, the CO2 level should not exceed certain limit, or the particulate matter should not go beyond certain point. That is where we know that when we cross the limit, it has affected the humans and other biota. That is where the limits are established. So that is what we done through the environmental management. Then establishing and nurturing institutions that effectively support environmental research, monitoring and management. Okay. So, and of course, now today in the country, the environmental research institutions are in the other side of the government. So that's where most of the institutions are facing the crisis, because none of this government, irrespective of who is ruling the country or the state, they have been targeted for bringing out the mismanagement or the inefficiency in the system. Then warning of threats and identifying opportunities. If we can identify the likely implication and how it affects the people, probably that rehabilitation and relocation can also become easier. For example, when the landslides were happening in Kodagu or Kerala, if you look at 2 years earlier, scientists have predicted of the likely implications of the mismanagement. Then sustaining and, if possible, improving the existing resources. See, by maintaining the resources, existing resources, you can also ensure the sustainability of the resources. For example, we have demonstrated by creating a mini forest in an area of 2 hectares, in a region which was earlier infested with the Parthenium, that is a weed. It was planted way back in 90s. The groundwater table at that time was 150 feet. Today, in the same location, the water is available at 10 to 15 feet, which shows that by improving the vegetation covering the region, we have ensured the availability of water. See, otherwise, 150 feet in 90s, how can it become 10 to 15 feet? When you see the Bangalore, in most part of Bangalore, groundwater table is 1,000 or 1,500 feet. Whereas in Iisc campus, where we have a mini forest, the groundwater table is at 10 to 15 feet. That also, whatever I have told theoretically, has substantiated through the practical thing. Now today, some of these experiments has helped in telling the government, in telling the people who are the critics, that there is a linkage between the vegetation cover and the water availability in the region. And it also improves the quality of life. Wherever the greenery is there, wherever natural forests are there, so we see the improved the health condition also. For example, recently, all of us face a problem associated with the COVID. If you see that where COVID has happened and the environmental condition, you will see a direct correlation. wherever the ecosystem is in good shape, you see less instances of COVID. Wherever the environment is in poor shape, you will see higher instances of COVID. So, for example, in Western Ghats region where we work, which extend from Kerala to Gujarat, in a villages where the forests or of native species are there, since people also depend on the forest, they get the natural resources which provide immunity to the people. That's where we didn't see the higher number of the COVID in those villages. Unlike the cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, etc., which face the problem of the COVID. Now, to highlight the reason for that is the kind of food that is taken by the people was providing the kind of immunity they required for resisting the COVID. That is what was happening in the case of COVID. Similarly, if you look at the dengue or any vector-borne diseases, the higher instances you will see in a region where there is a poor environmental quality. So that is where the environmental quality is always linked to the health of the people. Now, the third example I can give is the poor water quality, the condition in Bangalore. So, for example, this must be true in most of the cities. Lakes in Bangalore or the water bodies in any part of the country is being mismanaged by the engineers of 21st century. To handle the liquid waste generated in industry or the liquid waste generated at home, instead of treating it, they let the raw sewage or raw effluent into the water bodies. When the water bodies are contaminated, we will have the contaminants in our food. For example, in Bangalore, the lakes are fed with the industrial effluent and also the domestic sewage. Our study shows when people grow vegetable using this water which is there in the lake, and also the fish that is there in the lake, and also the green plant that grows in the lake profusely because of the nutrient availability with the sewage letting into the lake. That the green vegetable goes as the fodder for the animal. When we analyze the samples of vegetable, fish, and milk, we found higher in the heavy metal, higher composition of the heavy metal in all the food items. Now, the implication of this is there are higher instances of kidney failure and cancer in the city. The data I have is quite revealing. The kidney failure, which was 1 in 1 lakh about 10 years or 12 years back, today is 1 in 5,000. So that means the more and more people are losing the kidney. And especially, it is also affecting the vulnerable section of the society. I have a network of institutions for the environmental education program. I traveled in the rural area. When I traveled, I saw in one of the rural schools at Vartur, a girl child who was doing LKG has lost 1 kidney. Then the 8th standard, another girl child has both the kidney failed. When I look at their family background, the parents, father works as a clerk in an institution where he earns only 10 or 12,000 per month. But every week the child requires a dialysis, which costs about 2,000 to 3,000 rupees. So that means whatever the earning the parents do is not sufficient to meet the dialysis charges itself. That's how the vulnerable section of the society is paying the price. Not only vulnerable section of the society, even people like us, we get the vegetable from the market. We do not know from where the vegetable is coming. When you analyze the vegetable, we see the heavy metals in that. So especially the region where the people grow the vegetable using this water, contaminated water, you see this kind of problems are there. Kidney failure, etc. in the thing. Even in city of Bangalore, even in my campus, there are 2 or 3 people with a kidney failure. Now that means this is quite worrying. That is where if you are looking for a better life, you need to have a better environment in the region. So now when you look at the vegetation cover in Bangalore, if you go through my publication, you will see that using remote sensing data, we have brought out how urbanization is happening in a Bangalore of about 740 square kilometers. In 740 square kilometers, way back in 70s, the 68% was green cover. That means the trees and vegetation was there, 68%. and 3 or 4% was the building the built up area repairs of it, and remaining are the open spaces. This is in 73. That's where the city was known as a garden city. But today, if you look at Bangalore, of 740 square kilometer, you will see that 85% is under building, okay, and 3% is green cover. So that shows the region has lost the large proportion of the vegetation or tree cover in the region, and also the water bodies. There has been 88% decline in vegetation cover, 79% decline in the water bodies in city of Bangalore, with a concretization of 1055% in the last 4 decades. Now the implication of this is there's a scarcity of oxygen in the city. There are instances in the city, some of the dwellers have to use oxygen cylinders in the night. I'm not talking about COVID period. The COVID period, the requirement of oxygen increased manyfold, but even before that, there are people using oxygen cylinders, especially in the age group of 55 plus. So that's how we pay a heavy price. The common man pay the heavy price for a poor quality of life or a poor quality of environment in the region. Now, let us look at the fundamentals of environmental management. Let us take up the population and limits to growth. The interaction between population and environment is very complex and dynamic. The phenomenal growth in population in the last century has put pressure on the means of subsistence, throwing it out of balance with the environment. Coupled with the population increase, the consumption behavior of the people also has changed. That has led to the unsustainable situation. If you look at the Western country, the kind of the material that is being wasted, the use and throw culture has led to the unsustainable situation. Unfortunately, the current generation in India also have the accepted that use and throw culture. Not only they use and throw the materials, they also have started use and throw the elderly people in cities like Bangalore, etc. That's where you see the city where environmental quality is poor. You will see a higher number of the old age homes also. Today it has become convenient for the youngsters in the age group of 25 to 40 to throw their elders in the Ruddhashram or the old age homes. So such a inhuman practices are being done in a region where the environment is in a poor condition. So now, in a finite world, there are limits, and in practice, there are complex environment population linkages and feedback. Damage to the environment is a function of population, consumption level of the population, and technologies used to meet the needs and disposal of waste. Say now, for example, today all of us are using the mobile. Our use and throw culture of the mobile has led to the large scale, the waste generation also, and the resource consumption. For example, the material that is used, which are all limited. Industries might manufacture the goods today, but if the resources are not available tomorrow, then the next generation will not have the same kind of luxury what our generation has. That is where we need to have a limit on the usage of the non-renewable resources, especially if you look at phosphorus or lithium. These are all occurs in only certain place, and we do not have the renewability of those resources. That's why we need to be careful when we waste the resources. Okay. Now, why do we need the sustainable development? Let us try to understand. Sustainable development is defined as a pattern of social and structured economic transformation, that is development, which optimizes the economic and societal benefits available in the present without hampering the likely potential for similar benefits in the future. That means if you have made sure the resources that are available to you is also available to your children and grandchildren, you have ensured the sustainability, and that development is called sustainable development. For the development plan, you have to ensure that sustainable and equitable use of resources for meeting the needs of the present and future generations without causing damage to the environment. To prevent further damage, especially the water bodies, we should respect the water body. Instead, we have been abusing the water body by discharging the pollutant into the water body and also degrading the catchment of the water body. Then the third is that to conserve and nurture the biological diversity, gene pool, and other resources for long-term food security. When there is a biological diversity, you also have a diversity in food, diversity in medicine. When we remove the forest with the diversity, biology rich in biological diversity, we are also losing the diverse food and diverse medicine. Then you will have only the one kind product like pizza and such the junk food. So that we should, our children should not have that. Okay, that is where we need to nurture and conserve the biological diversity, gene pool, and for the ensuring the food security in the region. So now how to manage the environment management? See, there have been various practices people have done. One is ad hoc approach. The approach developed in reaction to a specific situation. See, when there's a flood happens, you come up with some mechanism to control the flood. That is ad hoc approach. But if you are thinking about the long term, then you need to have a better approach, either the system approach or a problem solving approach. Problem solving approach follows a series of logical steps to identify problems and needs and implement the solution. Then system approach, for example, ecosystem, agro-ecosystem, watershed, etc. These are the systems approach. So that you will take all the components in the system and try to manage the thing. You will, if you are an engineer working on water resources, you will not think only about the water availability. You will also look at how the water is can be sustained through the optimal management of the catchment, etc. Okay, then regional approach based on the ecological zones or biophysical units such as watershed, river basin, coastal zone, island, etc. Considering all the components of the ecosystem, you will manage the resources. Then you have specialist discipline approach, often adopted by professionals like air quality management, water quality management, etc. Okay. Then voluntary sector approach, environmental management by or encouraged and supported by NGOs. See, if there are a good NGOs in a region, they also become a watchdog in ensuring that the sustainability of resources. So now let's understand the ecosystem. Before that, so are there any questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
So, when we are talking about environmental management in the larger scenario, we haven't yet spoken about the role of the government. If we look at the current scenario, and just an example where the government is pushing the Northeast and Andaman islands to transform into a island to produce palm oil, the onus lies on like it's like saying that we are going through climate crisis, having said that we really are not working towards it. It's like a hogwash by the government. So in a larger perspective, in all of the government doesn't seem to be taking the responsibilities. So have we dealt with that part, at least that in the spectrum of the topic?
See, Shampi, I would say that let us learn the subject in a systematic way. Today, it is like a child going to the first standard. You are asking a question, so when the child becomes a professional, how he or she should be managing the environment. Okay. So that today I am introducing you to the basics of ecosystem and environment. Let us understand that. And by the time when we take up the case study, you will understand how to manage the thing. Then if there are some decisions taken, how to intervene and minimize the damage, or how to advise the system to not to have such illogical projects. Say when the government comes up with a project, do not think that politicians have the brain to come up with a project. It is probably a group of people who have advised the government. So the group could be the have the vested interest. That is where when you intervene and advise the government, probably the government will take it up. Some of the cases when we have returned the thing, I have seen changes happening in the system. So when I have not succeeded in the thing, when I communicate to the media has taken it in the thing. We have seen the success, whether it is a lakes in Bangalore or issues related to the Western Ghats. If you do the Google search, you will see that our intervention is at various levels. Okay. So that is at much higher level. After completing all 10 chapters, probably you would be able to answer what you have asked today. Okay.
Yes. So I was asking in terms of the approach, because you mentioned all the three approaches, and I was thinking, is there the approach also towards the government or from the government?
See, that is where I said, I would say that we need to have a regional approach, integrating all aspects. But probably the people would have looked at, they thought that palm oil they are getting from Malaysia. Malaysia is, not favorable to India, the current regime. So they want to teach a lesson to the Malaysia. They thought that if they stop importing the palm oil, then they are also teaching the Malaysians. So, but the implication is that we don't have a stock of palm oil. We should have enhanced the resources at the India. Then we should have talked about the banning the import of the palm oil, etc. See, that is where you need the specialist approach who think holistically, not ad hoc approach like reacting. See, it is nothing but a reactionary approach. Just because that government was hostile, the group of experts have advised the government to come with that kind of restriction. Had this the group of experts, if they had the expertise, if they have visualized the implication of such this one, then they wouldn't have done the mistake. See, it is something similar to one child formula in China. They understood the implication of that. Then they thought about 2 children. Now today they are talking about 3 children. So these are the kinds of things. That is where you need to visualize the likely implications of your decision before you implement it. That is where you need to have a stakeholder meeting consultation, and you need to have a specialist in the advising the system. Then probably we can minimize the damage that happens in the system. That is where we have the organization like Niti Aayog and all those things. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes the members who get into this kind of a thing, probably they are pushed by the vested interest. That is where we see the dilution in the thing.
Yes, sir.
I'm hoping things will change in the system. Compared to 20 years back today, there are changes in some of the domains. We, as the people become more and more knowledgeable, things might improve in the system. That is where we do, capacity building programs helps in that. Okay.
Got it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now let's look at the ecosystem. Yeah, please.
Sorry, Professor, just want to know these approaches. Is there any like top to bottom approach, or we can just dive straight in kind of thing, or is there any preferred method to approach these kind of approaches to environmental management?
When we talk about these approaches, what is happening currently? What are the approaches we are talking about it? What is the best approach? We will talk about it in the 8th or 9th chapter. When we read that,
All right.
we would have understood all the concepts. See, as you rightly said, top-down approach is not a right one. It should be the bottom-up approach. That's what Mahatma Gandhi talked about it in Surajya. Decentralized level of natural resources management and governance is the best approach than somebody sitting in Delhi and pushing their agenda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now let's look at the ecosystem. So now what I will do is I will give a break. It's at 10:30 now, as we all. So I was discussing about ecosystem. As you all know, ecosystem consists of biological community that occurs in some local and the physical and chemical factors that make up its living and abiotic environment. See, we have a pond, a forest, a township, or a grassland. When you are sitting in your room, if you see outside, you will see the living component, that is the biotic component, and non-living component, that is the abiotic component. So the abiotic component includes sunlight, temperature, precipitation, water, moisture, then soil or water chemistry. While the biotic component, you would see the mosquitoes or the ants, etc. The primary producers, herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, decivores, like that. So this constitutes the food chain also. Then when you look at the food chain, see, the primary producers produce a food like plants, which takes the solar energy, gets converted into the food, the glucose. So it takes away the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they convert it into glucose. This food is eaten by the next level, the herbivores, which are eaten by the carnivores and omnivores. Then whatever is left in the system is gets converted into elemental form by this degrading fungi or bacteria. They are called detritivores. Okay, the energy transformation and biogeochemical cycling are the main processes that comprise the field of the ecosystem ecology. So that means the maintaining the food is also maintain the balance. If you have a right number of carnivores, then you will maintain the herbivore as well as the the, the plants in the system. So that is where all these entities in the food chain, they become a vital component of the biotic elements in the ecosystem. Now, when you look at the process ecosystem, as I explained earlier, when there is a transaction from one level to other level, they might be eating the food, but there is a loss of energy in the form of heat, etc. So the producers of food, the plants, which are eaten by the consumers, and you have the abiotic component also, which helps in providing the food, the carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, etc. in the environment. Then whatever is left in the system is get decomposed into elemental form, which are done by the bacteria and fungi. So the earth is an open system with respect to energy. You have abundant solar energy. It's an open system, whereas earth is also a closed system with respect to the elements like C, N, and P, because that is where you need to ensure the recycling or the renewability of resources to maintain the balance in the system. For example, if you look at P, the phosphorus is available in limited quantity. If you use up the thing, then the next generation may not have the phosphorus itself. So that's where we need to understand these cycles as far as the flow system is concerned. We will discuss these cycles, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, in the subsequent slides. So now to summarize what I said so far, when you look at the food chain, the biotic element consists of producers, the consumers, which are three types: the primary, secondary, tertiary consumers. Then you have the decomposers, which put back the organic fraction into elemental form. When you look at this food chain carefully, there is a transaction of material and energy from one level to other level. So, and also when there is a material transaction and energy, there is a law of optimization, and also the law of thermodynamics happen. There's energy and material transfer happen from one level to other level, and also law of optimization, which is the third law of thermodynamics. You can learn from this. And also when you look at this slide carefully, there is nothing called waste in the nature. Where do you see the waste? You will see waste where waste people are there. Who are these waste people? The people who use the synthetic materials too much. They are the waste people. They are the ones who create a mess in the system. People too much dependent on the packaged food, the packaging, and the bottled water, etc. They constitute a thing. They generate more and more waste in the region. So they are the group of waste people. So that is where you see, if you are talking about the waste management, if you want to reduce the waste, first and foremost thing is you need to bring down the use of the material which are not assimilated by the nature. What are the material which are assimilated by the nature? Those are the organic fraction. See, when you look at this slide, the organic fraction gets converted into energy, which is being used by the various organisms. And whatever is left in the system is get converted into elemental form by the bacteria and fungi. So essentially the carbon and nitrogen gets converted into elemental form. That's where it is back to the nature, and it is available for the next cycle of operations. So now the nutrient cycles, let us look at the elements like C, H, O, N, and P, whose supply tend to limit the biological activity, are called nutrients. We have the water cycle or the hydrological cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle. As long as you maintain the cycling, there is the availability of resources. When we hurt the cycling or when we hurt the renewability, then only you see the scarcity of resources in the system. So when you look at the hydrological cycle, you see that rain happens. With the rain, the process of infiltration happens. That's where the water gets infiltrated into the underlying layers. So that's where groundwater recharge happens, subsurface storage of water happens, which get released to the rivers and streams during the post-monsoon season. That's where wherever the recharge has happened, you will not see the scarcity of resources or the water during the post-monsoon. During the monsoon, you have the water because of the rain, but during the post-monsoon, the water that is stored in the underlying layer is available to the society. Then this water in the ocean or river or through the plant get evaporated or transferred to the environment through the process of evaporation and transpiration. Then the cloud is formed. There is a process of condensation. Cloud formation happens. With the cloud formation, the stopping of the cloud leads to the precipitation and the cycle is complete. That's how the hydrological cycle happens. Similarly, you can see that the other cycles also. So the other cycles, if you take the cycling, the circulation of elements or matter, the organic and inorganic in biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere through energy flow. So that means there is a cycling of things in all the regions. For example, through the biosphere, the living entity, the atmosphere, the surrounding environment, hydrosphere in the water, and lithosphere through the soil, the energy flow and material flow happens. These elements are called nutrients. They are further grouped as a macro elements, which include O, C, H, etc. The minor elements are the NPK, the calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. N is nitrogen, P is phosphorus, K is potash, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. While the trace elements are iron, copper, zinc, the magnesium, manganese, the boron, etc. constitute the trace elements. So now this gives the glimpse of the biogeochemical cycle with the various cycles integrated. You can see the carbon, nitrogen, water cycle, the cycling is happened. That's how the nature functions. Nature functions in an integrated manner, unlike the professionals in our system. The professionals think the sectorally, and that's where we have the imbalance in the system. But to manage the complex systems like ecosystem, we need to have an integrated approach. You need to ensure the cycling of the elements, major element like C, H, N, okay, and also the minor elements like P, etc., and the trace elements also. So now let us understand what is biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle is the cycling of chemical elements through the earth, atmosphere, ocean, and sediment. That means there is a cycling of the material and energy. It can be described as a series of compartments or storage reservoirs and pathways between the reservoirs. So you have for example, if you look at phosphorus, phosphorus is deposits you can see in the rock. They become the storage reservoir. Then through the leaching, it get into the water. So that's where the pathway is through the water. So in ecology, a biogeochemical cycle is a circuit or pathway by which the chemical element or molecule moves through both biotic and abiotic compartments. So that means both biotic and abiotic compartments you need to keep in mind when you plan for sustainability of natural resources. In effect, the element is recycled all through some such cycle that may be places called sinks where the element is accumulated or held for a long period of time. I give an example of a rock where the phosphorus gets deposited and is stored for a longer time. When you extract it for this one, then you are also making it available to the society. The significance is organic matter or nutrients are used and assimilated in the building of plant tissues and among different organisms or at different trophic levels. So now let's look at the hydrological or water cycle. Let us try to understand this. So for example, during the precipitation, you have the water coming to the earth. The water gets infiltrated. The infiltrated water fills this zone. This is a groundwater zone. Then you have the zone which is the Vado zone. This zone, groundwater zone, and then the Vado zone consists of rocks and the cavity. The water gets filled in the zone. During monsoon, you have rain because of you have water because of the rain. Now, post monsoon, the water that is stored in this region moves towards the river or stream. That's how you have the water for 4 months. During the summer, the water that is stored in the groundwater zone moves towards the river or stream or a lake. That's how you have water in river or stream or lake for the next 4 months. See, in Western Ghats, we had put a sensors in the various layers to find out how much water goes in the underlying layer and how much water moves laterally during the post monsoon. See, we found that when a catchment consists of vegetation, that too of native species, that means the location specific species, it allows the water to percolate. That is mainly because native species vegetation are diverse. When the vegetations are diverse, the soil also will have a microbes which have a diversity. Because of diverse microorganisms, soil become porous or permeable. When soil become porous or permeable, it allows the water to percolate. It fills this zone and then it fills this water zone. Then only after saturation of these two zones, you will see a water flowing toward the river or stream. Okay. Then, our sensors have given the idea how much water goes in the underlying layers during the monsoon. And then we also monitored how much water moves laterally during the post-monsoon. See, in this subsurface, we have some process called pipe flow. The water moves laterally. Our sensors have detected how much water moves laterally during the post-monsoon. See, when the vegetation is on native species, the 4 months rainfall, then 4 months the water is available in stream because of the water stored in the water zone, and 4 months because of the water stored in the groundwater zone. When you convert this the native species of diverse vegetation into monoculture plantation, monoculture means one type of vegetation. It could be the rubber, it could be acacia or eucalyptus. That is what most of the people convert the natural forest into. If you go to Kerala, you will see large the conversion of the forest into the rubber plantation. So when that is the thing, what happens with the monoculture plantation? When the leaves fall, the biodegradation take a longer time. They form a thick layer. Because of that, the water recharge might happen and it fills this zone only in this zone. So that's where during the post monsoon, you will have 4 to 6 months of water. It's mainly because the 4 months water because of the rain and remaining 2 or 3 months because of the water stored in this region. Okay, in the water zone. When you degrade the catchment, remove the forest completely. When the land is degraded, whatever the water falls here flows as the flood to the ocean. The water runs towards the ocean. And since the water runs towards the ocean, there is no recharge happen, there is no infiltration happen. In absence of infiltration, you will see that streams or wells or the lakes have become seasonal. So now to summarize, if you want to maintain the sustainability of water, you need to ensure that there is a vegetation of native species. That is where the watershed for a water body, it plays a very important role. Watershed is a region which they shuts the water or which ensure the water moves towards the water body. Our study shows at least 33 to 60% should have the native species vegetation to sustain the water throughout the year. We have published this article in the current science, which is available online. The last May issue, May 2020, there is an article saying water sustenance in rivers. We have done a comparative assessment across the 4 river basin in Western Ghats, which have the varied levels of the development. Some have the hydroelectric project, some have monoculture plantation. We have done a comparative assessment. The highlight of that study is that the vegetation, kind of vegetation, and they decides the availability of water during the post-monsoon. Now the water, the process of evaporation happen and also transpiration happen. You would have seen wherever plants are there, the phenomena of transpiration happen. This water molecule get into the atmosphere, then the process of condensation happens. With that, the condensation, cloud formation happens. When there are hillocks with a large trees, they stop the cloud. With the stopping of cloud, the precipitation happens. That is where the cycle is completed. Okay, now to understand this, those who understand this water cycle will never mismanage the catchment, will never mismanage the water resources. But now I see there is a gap in the current generation. To highlight that, see, I was invited to one of the institution in Telangana where the faculty development program was there. I was invited as a resource person. When I was taking a class, I asked the candidates who are essentially the faculty from various engineering and science colleges. There were 60 participants who were there. I asked what is water cycle or a hydrological cycle. One gentleman got up. I thought he will explain the water cycle the way I have explained just now. What he told me is that something very worrying. He just told me, you see outside, people are carrying the water pots on the bicycle. When you carry water on bicycle or on cycle, it becomes water cycle. See, that highlights the lack of knowledge in the people in the system. Such people becoming faculty or a professional or the threat to the sustainability of natural resources. That is where we need to do the capacity building. That is where we need to ensure that everyone becomes environmentally literate so that this kind of mismanagement doesn't happen in the system. So now, when you look at the watershed management in the river authorities or a thing, most of them are civil engineers, and more since they lack the knowledge of the ecology or ecosystem, they think that if they remove the vegetation, they can store more water. But sustenance of water become a deciding factor if there are no vegetation in the catchment. That is why most of the places where reservoirs are constructed, where watershed is mismanaged, the scarcity of waters also happens, and the reservoirs do not have the water throughout the year. Now let us look at the next cycle, carbon cycle.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, that article which you published, can you please repeat that name?
So that is in the Current Science. The journal name is Current Science. That is in the May 2020. Every month 2 issues will come. If you say give the Google search Current Science, May 2020, TVRAMACHANDRA, you will get the article that is written by me and my students. Dr. Vinay, Bharat, and all are involved in that research.
Fine, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
In case if you don't locate it, you send me a mail. I'll send it across. Okay. That
Sure.
article is about 9 or 10 MB because there are color photographs and all are there. So that's why the size is big. Instead of sending, you can download it from the archive of the Current Science. Okay.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So now,
Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
Did I get it correctly, sir? In the water cycle, that means if we have native species of plants, then it is better than having diverse species.
No. Native species of plants are diverse plants. See, in the nature, there is always a diversity.
Yes, sir.
Whereas in the man-made system, you see the diversity is remote. For example, clones, monoculture plantations, they are one species, like rubber, acacia, eucalyptus, like that. See, when the diversity is there in the form of trees and the vegetation, the soil microorganism also become diverse. Because of that, porosity or permeability is higher, and that allows the process of infiltration. The infiltration helps in groundwater recharge and maintaining the water in the Wadow zone.
Sir, noted, sir. And sir, can you please elaborate the term watershed? When we say watershed, how it is different from river basin or coastal area?
See, watershed or a catchment or a basin are the synonyms. For example, we use in India the term watershed or Jalanayana Pradesha or catchment, whereas Americans use the term basin. River basin is nothing but river catchment. When I take up the case study, I'll show a river with a basin. Okay, it becomes clearer. That means the basin or a catchment is a region which drains the water to the particular river or a lake. For example, when you take this as a water body, this is the region which drains the water to this thing. Whichever region which direct the water to that particular water becomes the catchment or the basin or the watershed or Jalanayan Pradesh. Okay.
Okay.
Noted. Water catching and directing the water to a particular location.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Noted.
Okay. Thank you. Now let's look at the carbon. See, you know that carbon is a very important element in the nature. See, you all use a vehicle, you are emitting carbon. That means you are burning the carbon. The oxides of carbon get into the atmosphere. Then species of carbon, which include carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, etc. Similarly, when you burn fuel, you have sulfur and nitrous oxide, etc. These are all called greenhouse gases. They are called greenhouse gases. They are not green in color. They form the effect called greenhouse effect. You would have seen greenhouses which are used to moderate the temperature and the climate within to grow a plant. Now, when the gases form a layers in the atmosphere, they form a shield. So that sunlight which enters the earth, it does not get escaped. since the energy, the thermal energy is not escaped from the earth starts forming the warmer and warmer, or the heating of the earth happens. That phenomena is called warming of the earth or a global warming. The consequences of global warming is that it will disrupt the hydrological cycle, it will disrupt the nutrient cycle. That is where we have to be careful on changes of climate because of the global warming. How one can address the carbon cycle is the best way is the decarbonization. One is to minimize the emission. Second one is to enhance the entities which take away the carbon. Now, when you look at the plants or algae in the water body, they take away during the process of photosynthesis, they take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and in the presence of light, convert that into glucose. That is where in the form of food, it is available for the plant and dependent biotic organism. And you see that CO2 gets converted into oxygen. That oxygen is being inhaled by all of us. So that is where when we inhale the oxygen, we also give out carbon dioxide. See, all the biological organisms, whether animals, we are all animals, we leave out the carbon dioxide. If you look at how much carbon dioxide each one of you are giving out, say if you are young, you are giving out carbon dioxide to an extent of 980 grams per person per day. For every day, during a day, you are giving out almost a kg of carbon dioxide. While elderly people of my group, the age group will give out 540 grams per person per day. So now, uh, who are the people taking away the carbon from the atmosphere? This carbon what is released by us, the biological organism gets into the atmosphere, and it's in the atmosphere is taken away by the plants. In the terrestrial plants in the form of trees, grasses, etc., and algae in the water body. How much they take away per hectare of the plants? Our study shows about 6 to 9 tons of carbon is removed from the atmosphere by the plant. So that means 1 hectare of tree takes away about 6 to 9 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. By that ratio, for every human being, there has to be the 7 or 8 trees per person. That means where you live, you need to have 7 to 8 trees for this. That is where we came up with a theory saying that at least 33% should be green cover in a region so that it can maintain the oxygen level. At the same time, it will help in the infiltration of the water. It is not the rule, it is not the law, it is the basic natural phenomena wherein if you maintain the green cover, you maintain the renewability or cycling in the system, there is a balance in the system. But if we disrupt the balance or the diatom, naturally, you know that the deposits of algae get into the thing, the carbon storage happens in the ocean bed, etc. Then, as you remove as you look at the reason, the carbon storage can happen in the plant also. When the plants die, you see that carbon gets released into a system, or when we take the food and when we respire also, the carbon dioxide gets released into the system. Okay, so that's where the one other way, if you are addressing the carbon, if you want to manage carbon at individual level, you need to bring down the carbon emission to the environment. And as far as possible, if you maintain the greenery, you are doing your job as as a responsible citizen. You might say that if I alone do it, how it matters. Each one thinks like that. If they do it alone, then the entire community does it, and that's how you see the greenery, and that's how you see the balance in the system. Then you have oxygen cycle. I have highlighted.
Yeah, Professor, sir, 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the carbon cycle, you have mentioned that 33% basis is clear. The point is now because of the growth in population as well as industrialization, this 33% may change in over a period of time.
See, I'll tell you that is where you should not be carried away by the people's, with the vested interests who come with a theory that population is a problem and all. See, look at
industry is, of course, industrialization also is developing the carbon gases.
If you do the planning properly, you can have industries, you can also have the plants. Both can coexist. The one is not at the cost of the other. See, like you are setting up the industry, if you make sure in that industrial area, have 33% green cover, you are addressing the dust, noise, and also the emission. See, that is what the people have to see. All these people who go behind the development agenda, they come with a theory saying that all this creates a problem. But you can also have the good industrial setup. For example, if you look at the Tata Steel, this one, even before my birth, they had the wastewater treatment, they had the greenery, they maintained the thing for the almost last 60 years now. So these are the things. See, if there is a
So
will,
balancing is required. That is what you are saying. Is the balancing is required. So as long as
that is where the management is required.
yeah,
That
management
is
and
conscious people are required. See,
Right.
otherwise, all these people who say the population problem and the emission is a problem now, they are looking at their own development. They are looting the resources at the cost of the people.
Yeah.
See, as I said earlier, I did the study of the fuel wood requirement in the villages in the Western Ghat region. The quantum of fuel wood used does not be even a fraction of the wood that is removed for the commercial purposes. When the industry talk about it, they will talk about population, they talk about fuel wood extraction and all. That is where science can help in solving the problem. That is where, as a person attending this course, if you can quantify how much is the fuel wood used, then you can counter those arguments saying that poor people are responsible for the pollution. Okay.
yeah, fine.
Now, oxygen is the converse of what we talked about it. Okay. Then you also see that as the role of UV in the atmosphere. If UV gets into the earth, you have UV, gamma, and you have visible band in electromagnetic spectrum. The ozone in the atmosphere protects the earth from the UV rays reaching the earth. Now, if UV is deterioration happens, then you see that if a ozone deterioration happens, then UV rays will reach the earth, then people will have skin cancer, etc. That's where ozone, maintaining the ozone is an important thing. We should not use the material which degrades the ozone. You also would know that 16th of this month is celebrated as a ozone day, to bring awareness in our people. Now, as far as this cycle is concerned, plants give the oxygen and we respire that and then convert into carbon dioxide and then get released to the atmosphere in the form of CO2. Again, the cycle continues. And part of the oxygen also forms the ozone. That is where, if you understand O2, ozone, this one, maintaining the ozone layer becomes critical to stop the UV rays reaching the earth. That is very crucial. Okay. See, earlier we understood that refrigeration, the material like CFC, fluorinated carbon, etc., were responsible for thinning of ozone layer in the atmosphere. See, when we might have the comfort of using a refrigeration, but if it has a harmful compound which is degrading the ozone, then the cancer is also entering us. So that is where, if you look at the country today, there's a large portion of the people have the cancer. Then we have the nitrogen cycle, similar to the carbon cycle. You see that the material, the process of ammonification and the nitrification, denitrification happen. That is where the nitrogen gets released to the atmosphere. See, when you have the organic matter, with the mineralization, you have done the organic matter, it decays, ammonia is formed. Okay, then it is getting to the nitrite form through the nitrification, bacteria, etc. Then through the nitrites or the unstable then oxidization gives the nitrate. That is where through the denitrification it gets into the nitrogen, and also it gets into the plant. The plants assimilate the nitrogen which is required. The resources are required for the plant growth, etc. That's how the cycle is maintained, the system. Then you have, when the precipitation happens, the N gets into the system, get into the water body. Then you have the in the gaseous form as well as in the soluble form available for the biotic element. Okay. Then phosphorus, this is where the
Sir, just Sandesh here.
Yeah.
It's just while going through the book, like comparing the other cycles, it had mentioned like nitrogen cycle is little complex or less sensitive as compared to other cycles.
See, yeah, I agree with that. See, if you understand the thing, see, suppose if you do not manage this properly, then you are bringing see, that is where the management of the organic residue is very important. If you do not do that, then you have other implications of this one, with the leaching, the water body get contaminated. Then, essentially the wastewater, people who work in wastewater sector or the solid waste has to be understand this. When we release the waste, the liquid waste into the water body, the liquid waste essentially consists of nutrients like N and P. See, we all eat protein, the nitrogen get into the system. We wash the cloth with detergent, that is where the phosphorus get into the system. Now, when N and P, see, if you do not take out that from the sewage, that is where the treatment is required. When you look at the wastewater treatment, there are 3 levels of treatment: primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment. Primary treatment removes the large particle. Secondary treatment will remove the chemical ions like the carbonate, the calcium, magnesium, the hardness, etc. While the tertiary treatment is the nutrient removal happens. Now, most of the municipalities, at least in Bangalore, what they have set up is a sewer treatment plant, which are secondary, because the tertiary treatment is very expensive. It is electricity requirement and also the labor requirement. So none of the municipalities can have the tertiary treated water. They can have demonstration plant like in Kabban Park in Bangalore. So when that is the case, you will still have the nutrient in the form of N and P in the partially treated water. When that water is let into the water body, you see that there are higher levels of groundwater, the contamination happens. See, our study shows in Bangalore, in 2005, when we did a study in a lake surrounding area, that wells had a nitrate level, a higher nitrate level. Why the nitrate level? See, the people are letting the sewage into the water body, which had N. As the surface water moved toward the groundwater resources, it got oxidized into nitrate. Nitrate is a carcinogen, which introduces cancer. See, that is where one has to be careful. Had you managed that properly, then you could have used that nitrogen for a beneficial purpose, wherein it is required for the plant, the nutrient. So you would, instead of providing it as a nutrient for the plant or the biotic element, we have contaminated water. The nitrate is a carcinogen, which introduces cancer. But now, what we have done at the Jakkur is, we have introduced the constructed wetland. That means secondary treated water from the STP passes through the constructed wetland and algal pond. This constructed wetland is the group of plants are grown in an area. Those are marsh-loving plants, that means water-loving plants, and there is a stagnation pond which has the algae. When the water passes through these two, it removes the N and P. That means N is required by the plants, it will be taken by the terrestrial plant, while the P is taken away by the algae. We have monitored this for the last 10 years, and this is one of the models, which is the successful model, that is also known as Iisc model. When I was in the committee, I made sure that these are implemented, and my students have monitored this lake for the last 10 years and surrounding borewells. Today, there are about 300 wells in the surrounding area. None of the wells have the nitrate. See, that is where you need to understand the complexity of the thing. Complexity happens when we mismanage. If you don't manage the thing, then probably things become easier for the thing. That is where one need to understand the requirement to maintain the cycling. And the second thing is, if you don't do it, what are the implications? If you understand, probably you will manage the system better. Now, at least I have a satisfaction that 300 plus borewell users, the Iisc is giving a clean water to the residents. If not the entire Karnataka, at least we have been successful in that. That report is available online. It is called constructed wetland and also integrated wetland ecosystem. These two reports, one will give the design of the constructed wetland, what kind of species are required. We have given the location specific native species. Then the integration of that and monitoring that lake for the last 10 years is talked about it in the integrated wetland ecosystem. And this is one of the popular design in the Bangalore as well as in India. And globally also, people appreciate this design. Okay, now let's move to the phosphorus. I talked about phosphorus getting into the water when we wash the cloth with detergent. Now, if you look at the phosphorus, they are only the deposits only in a country like China, Mongolia, etc. there is a limited resources. Now, using phosphate for the detergent is the misuse of the resources, because phosphorus is required for the food and phosphorus is required for the medicine. See, phosphate is used for manufacturing fertilizer, which is used for growing crops. Similarly, phosphate is used in the medicine. It helps in the bone development, etc. The essential requirement of the phosphorus is in the medical industry as well as the food industry. But what is done is that it's mismanaged or misused by the detergent manufacturer. That's where you see the frothing and the foaming happens in the lakes or in the water body, whether it is Yamuna or Belandur Vartur Lake in Bangalore or the Great Lakes in the Canada and the US. If you look at in 90s, there was the phenomenon of flooding, the frothing of foaming, and that is where those governments brought a restriction on use of phosphate in the detergent. Coming to the India, when Belandur and Vattur Lake, we saw the frothing and the foaming. Of course, I prepared a scientific document. I submitted to the government of Karnataka, which in turn was submitted to the government of India. Today, Bureau of Indian Standards, based on our recommendation, has come out with a restriction on usage of phosphate for detergent. When we talked about the phosphate misuse in detergent, we also talked about what are the alternatives can be used in the detergent so that you can have the similar the frothing and all those things. When you put a detergent and stir it, the foam formation happens. If you want to have it still, then using the environmentally benign product like there are various other alternatives which can be used for the thing. There are abundantly available in the places like Maharashtra and part of Karnataka, etc. Okay. Now, if you look at that, this is a limited resource. That's where the management of this resource has become very important and very vital. So if you see that when we grow the crop, we need the phosphate. That is where you say that when the animal discharge or when human discharge, naturally through our fecal matter, you see the phosphate get released. Ultimately, it gets into the water body, and there's a accumulation in the sediment, and then eventually, which is a long process. But what we need to understand is this: we are bringing in the imbalance in system by over exploitation of these resources, and also the day is not far off. We may have to be at the mercy of these countries, especially the hostile country like China, to get the phosphate-based the product. Then similar with the sulfur cycle, you know that when you burn the fossil fuel, the sulfur, the emission happens in the system, or coal burning also this one. Then you know that there are various entities similar to the phosphorus and nitrogen cycle. Okay. So now with that, let us move to from the material to the energy within the system. When you look at the system, every organism dependent on other organism for food. Essentially, when that transaction happens, there is a loss of energy also. There's about the 10% loss happens from one level to the other level. Now, if you are talking about the conserving a particular animal or a particular taxa, you need to understand this, the implication of your decision. For example, if you think about a tiger, okay, the conserving the tiger, you need to understand how many herbivores it eats per year. Then to sustain herbivores, how much area should be under grassland or under green. So for example, one tiger per year requires, one tiger at this level requires about the 66 to 70 the herbivores per year. To sustain 66 or 70 herbivores per year, you need at least 2 square kilometers of grassland. Now, when you talk about conserving the tiger, apart from advertising every day and in NDTV and collecting money, you should also think about the enhancing the grassland and maintaining the integrity of the grassland so that the tiger population can be sustained. Now, if you remove the tiger in the system, what will happen? Let us understand. For example, tigers are there in Kaveri belt. Now, when you remove the tiger, then you see the herbivore population increases. With more herbivore population, they will degrade the grasses and the vegetation. With the degradation of grasses and the grasses and vegetation, you see that water retention capability of the catchment comes down. What I talked about few minutes back when I talked about the water cycle. That means it leads to the scarcity of water. That means removal of tiger or removal of a taxa at this level we have introduced the imbalance in the system. That is where if you understand the food chain, you have understood the ecology effectively. If you have not understood, then probably you need to relook at it again. And here you can also understand, if you are an engineer, you can understand the thermodynamic principle. All the 3 laws of thermodynamics you can learn through this. So as the material transfer from one level to other, there is a loss of energy, there's a loss of material. So then, you know, the law of optimization or entropy also you can understand through this. Okay, now let us understand.
Yeah. It is just not any question. You just made me to recall my history, like in 1999 or 2000. So I had written an essay on tiger conservation. So when I was in my high schools, so same facts you explained now. So I had written there actually, and it bagged me a prize for the district level in Chikmagalur.
But do you continue the same idea now, or you have become different? Like other youngsters, you know, when they are in school, they are very good, this one, ecologists. But when they come to graduation, they become irresponsible soldiers.
Actually, my like course, I wanted to do BSc AG and I wanted to be in the forest department, but my family they forced me to be an engineer.
Well, see that background doesn't matter. It is only where you have been trained to think.
Yeah.
You know, you will think like an engineer, but you can practice, you can implement the ecological concept. Okay.
Yeah.
You can see there are many engineers who are also successful as a biologist and ecologist. Say, for example, you talked about tiger. Well-known conservationist Ullas Karan. It's an engineer. Okay. Though he, in spite of being an engineer, he knows the principles of nature, and that's where he has come up with a conservation mechanism. So, you know, engineer or the science, this one, or a commerce, it's only ways of acquiring the knowledge. But after that, as a professional, as long as you are a human being with a common sense, you can manage the ecosystem better, unlike any other profession. What is required is that the common sense. See, when you respect mother at home, okay, you will respect mother nature also. If you are not respecting mother at home, you will also not respecting the mother nature. That is where abuse of mother earth happens. That's where mismanagement happens. That is where we have scarcity of resources. When people don't treat mother at home properly, you know, there is always a poverty, scarcity of resources, conflict at home. Where mothers are taken care, you see there is a kind of sustainability at home. Even if they are earning only 5,000, there is a happiness. Where mother is not kept happy, you will see even if they are earning 1 lakh, there is no happiness at home. That's where my message is, let us respect mother at home.
Yes.
And mother earth, so that everyone gets the motherly treatment, so that no one is deprived of their food and water. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. The principles and tools that we can use, they broken down into 3 major components: element ratio, the mass balance, element cycling. Okay. Now we started quantifying. You know, how do you say that a particular system is the healthy system? You will find out elemental ratio or the mass balance. You will try to understand the element cycling, etc. So now, when you look at the element ratio, see, for every organism, there has to be a certain composition of elemental ratio. If there is an imbalance in that, that means there is the pollution or there is the additional input of the additional element. So that's where the imbalance is introduced. See, in biological systems, the elemental ratios, important elements are referred as conservative. These elements are often nutrients. By conservative, we mean that an organism can change only slightly the amount of these elements in their tissue if they are to remain in good health. Given below are the example of algae. See the C, N, P, and iron. The carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and the iron should be 106, 16, 1 is to 0.01. If there is any alteration in this, then you'll see that there is an imbalance in that. Similar to the blood. See, in your blood, when it is tested, if there is some change in some level, then people will say that there is an unhealthy situation. Exactly, from the elemental ratio, we can find out the health of the system. When you assess the health of the algae, you are also assessing the health of the ecosystem, that is the water body. That is where, algae are used as a bioindicator because they help in, they reveal the health of the ecosystem through this elemental composition and the species composition, etc. If there is an alteration in this, then the species which are tolerate to this change scenario will dominate. By that you can find out whether the water body is healthy or unhealthy. See, once we know this ratio, we can compare them to the ratios that we measure in a sample of algae to determine if the algae are lacking in one of these limiting nutrients. Then you can say that whether there's a scarcity of resources or whether there's a surplus of resources. So then you have the mass balance approach. We can determine whether the system is changing and how fast it is changing. The equation is net change is equal to input plus output plus internal change, or the net production is equal to gross production minus respiration. In this equation, the net change in the system from one time period to another is determined by what the inputs are and what the outputs are and what the internal change in the system is. As an engineer, you would know that every the process has some amount of loss. In the biological system, we have respiration, the loss of energy. Okay. Now the element cycling describes where and how fast the elements move in a system. There are two general classes of system that we can analyze as mentioned above, the closed and open system. A closed system refers to a system where the inputs and outputs are negligible compared to the internal changes. For the open system, there is no such condition. There are two ways we can describe the cycling of materials within the closed system, either by looking at the rate of movement or at the pathways of the movement. Rate is number of cycles per time. As rate increases, productivity increases. Say, for example, when you are talking about a tree crop, you will talk about how many years once you do the harvesting. Cycling time of that thing. If you are growing teak or if you are growing any other crop, which has a commercial value, you think about when you do that. That is where you essentially look at number of cycles per time. That means if you can harvest once in 6 years, you say cycling time is 6 years. Okay. Then pathways important because the different reaction that may occur. Now, compared to that, in open system, there are inputs and outputs as well as the internal cycling. Thus, we can describe the rate of movement or the pathway just as we did in the closed system. But we can also define a new concept called a residence time. So when you look at the tree, you will see there is a residence time. For example, taking the solar energy, the food is converted into biomass. Biomass is stored in the plant for a long time till you harvest it. The time you take to harvest that resources is called a residence time. That means the residence time indicates how long on average an element remains within the system before leaving the system. When you harvest it, if you use it for burning, then you are releasing that those elements. If you are using it for furniture, etc., then it is stored for much more time till you dispose it out. So then these are the various other rate, pathways, residence time. Residence time is the total amount of matter to the output rate of matter. For example, when you look at the lake, when you allow the water to enter the lake and you see that at the inlet and the water moves out in the outlet. By the time water enters the lake to the outlet, how much time it has taken, that is called a residence time. Say, for example, in a lake where sewage is letting, if you want to find out how long the nutrient will remain in the system in that cycle, you will see at the beginning of the sewage inflow, and then you will see that the sewage, how long it has traversed, taken to traverse to the outlet. See, because this is, the water moves from one level to the other level, there has to be a transaction unless it's a stagnant system. So that time is called a residence time. The residence time in a water body is how long that entity or the sun remains in the system, whether it's a sewage or a nutrient, etc. So now let's look at the trophic level. Trophic level of an organism is its position in a food chain, the sequence of consumption and energy transfer through the environment. For example, a simple grazing food chain comprised of the plants which are producers, which are eaten by the consumer herbivore, then which are eaten by the carnivore, which is both plant and herbivore. That is this shows the trophic level. These are the various levels: the producers, consumers, then the the primary consumer, secondary consumer, or the carnivore, etc. So now the feeding of one organism upon another in a sequence of food transfers is known as a food chain. The another definition of the chain of transfer of energy, which typically comes from the sun, from one organism to the another. When you talk about car, you are converting solar energy into food, which is eaten by the next level of organism. Okay, this is a natural food chain you would have seen in the nature. This is the human, this one, they would have planted car, and they would have had the animal husbandry to have the meat as well as the dairy product. That is the human introduced system. Compared to that, in nature, you'll see that all these entities, irrespective of the humans existence, they manage their life by depending on other organisms. So now when you look at the nature, see there is a web. See it is this could eat many other things. They have the, it might eat plant, animals. That means there is a web formation that is called the food web. In an ecosystem, there are many different food chains, and many of these are cross-linked to form a food web. For example, if you look at humans, the people eat plants, people eat animals, people also take algae. These are the various uh, sorry, there was an incoming call. I just attended to the telephone. Okay. Yeah, I was talking about the food web. We understood food chain as well as the food web. So now let's look at the biomes. Biome is a major regional group of distinct plant and animal communities best adapted to the region's physical natural environment, the location, latitude, elevation, and terrain. It all depends on the climatic regime. That is where the kind of the biome that exists in a particular region, you cannot expect that the same biome to occur everywhere. So that is where we need to, if you are interested in a particular kind of species of plants or animals, you need to maintain the integrity of the system. A biome is made up of ecoregions or community at stable steady state and all associated transitional, disturbed or degraded vegetation, fauna and soil, but can often be identified by the climate vegetation type. So now these are the various biomes you would have seen in your textbook when you are in school. These are the various biomes: the tundra, taiga, grassland, deciduous forest. These are the sheds the leaves during the dry season. Then you have the chaparral, the shrub plantation. Then the desert biome, etc. Hello, Bharat, I will talk to you later. I'm in a class, no? Show him. Will register. Okay. Now let's look at the impact of imbalance in the ecosystem. Imbalance is the ratio of producer, consumers, and decomposers. Also disturb the pattern of energy flow through the food chain and food web, disrupting the ecological food pyramid. I gave an example of tiger. The absence of tiger, how it introduces, lead to the scarcity of water because of removal of grassland. We lose the water infiltration capability of the catchment. That means, when you bring in, suppose if you say that you don't like the snake, if you remove the snake, then what will happen? The rodent population increase. Then it will eat away all your grains. So that's where one need to understand what are the kinds of what are the various elements in the food chain and maintain the balance. Because some people don't like owls. But if you look at owls, there's a wonderful job of the maintaining the balance in the system. They remove the rodents. So that's where wherever owls are there, you will see the prosperity also. Unfortunately, people have misinterpreted the owls, which always sit with a close eye during the daytime. They misinterpret and they misunderstood the ecological importance of the owlets in the system. Now the effect included the demographic eruption of a large, small obligate, riparian dependent herbivore, the moo, during the past 150 years, the subsequent alteration of riparian vegetation structure and density by ungulate herbivory, and the coincident reduction of avian, the neotropical migrants in the impacted willow community. These are all being talked about in the literature. Apart from that, my own examples I had given you also. So now when the ecological food pyramid is disrupted, what will happen? Insufficient consumption of the food leaves the organism deprived of energy, thus affecting the organism's metabolism, leads to mass starvation and the mortality in the world population. So that is what is happening in some countries. You see the people look so weak, and there's a scarcity of water, there's scarcity of food also. And it leads to the extinction of particular species while their predators dominate, resulting in an ecological niche in the ecosystem they change. So now when there is an increase in the predator, there also a limit on that. So, but all the other taxa would have disappeared from the system. It leads to the extinction of the species. Okay. So these are some of the examples people have talked about it. The changing lake in the Washington, how the nutrient level has led to the the reduction in the biological organism. That is where they said that they how the imbalance lead to the availability of the thing. See, when you look at the algae, they also help in sequestering the carbon. That means they sequester the carbon from the atmosphere. They maintain the carbon level in the system. At the same time, as a food, the algae has its relevance as a nutrient. They are used as a in the nutraceutical industry. When you try to take a food which are the protein supplements, invariably that is the algae what grows in the water body. Okay, that is where if you maintain the balance, then you have enough quantity of algae which will also provide the food and nutrient to your body. So now let's move further. The ecology and the environment. The sum of all the living and non-living factors makes the environment of an ecosystem. The place an organism lives is called a habitat. So now you need to understand what is habitat. Habitat is a place where an organism lives. You will see a frog the closer to the marshy area. It requires water as well as the land. That is where the habitat is closer to the water bodies, etc. Habitat is a part of the Earth's surface where life originates and develops according to geographical conditions. Or when you look at that, there is an interrelationship between the various ecological elements, the biotic and abiotic elements. So now I'm opening the document. Let me know whether it opens. Okay, just a minute. Didn't open. Okay, essentially that link was showing the linkage between the biotic and abiotic. In the book also, that photograph is there, which gives the interrelationship among the biotic and within the biotic element, and also now all these elements, the biotic and abiotic, are interrelated and function in an orderly manner as a definite system. When you are sitting in your room, if you see outside, essentially you are looking at the environment. You are looking at both the living and non-living factors in the environment. You will see the animals moving around, humans, the human animals, etc. Okay. So now let us move further. Any unit that includes all the organisms that function together in a given area, interacting with the physical environment, so that a flow of energy leads to a clearly defined biotic structures and cycles of material between the living and non-living parts in an ecosystem. That's where when you talk about the organism, you need to keep in mind the habitat. There is an interaction between the biotic and abiotic elements. Through the abiotic element, there is a transaction of the minerals and materials. And through the biotic element, you see the transaction of the material and energy happens through the food chain. That is where you need to keep in mind the cycling of material between the biotic, the living part, and non-living parts in an ecosystem. That's where a particular species of fish, which grows in a particular location, you cannot bring it to some other location and cultivate it. So even if you cultivate it, even if it grows, it may not have the same medicinal property or the nutrient level. So that means the habitat makes all the difference. Okay. The ecosystem is a basic functional unit and includes both organism and abiotic environment, each influencing the properties of the other, and both necessary for maintenance of life as we have it on the earth. Now, this level of organization must be of primary concern for us if society is to begin implementing holistic solution for the problems now emerging, you understand the level of organization and interaction within those levels, then probably you can also become a good manager in managing the natural resources. Okay, so now I will summarize what I said so far. Let's look at the structure of an ecosystem. You have a biotic and abiotic component. Biotic component is in an ecosystem includes organisms that are broadly divided into two categories on the basis of their nutritional status or the trophic produces food. While the heterotroph depends on autotroph for the food. Autotrophs are the organisms that can produce their own food, such as green plants and certain bacteria and algae through photosynthesis and are known as producers. Okay. Then you have the heterotrophs depend directly or indirectly upon the autotrophs for their food and are grouped into primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. Primary consumers include herbivore animals like rodents, cows, deer, goats, etc., which depends on their food on green plants. So they are the primary consumers. Then secondary consumers are the carnivores and omnivores. They are adapted to eat herbivores as well as animals like sparrows, crows, foxes, etc. Then we have tertiary consumers. These are the top carnivores like lions, tigers, hawks, vultures, etc., which prey upon the herbivores and omnivores. So now when you look at any ecosystem, you need to maintain the balance in the ecosystem. When you maintain that, you are ensuring the continuity of the resource availability in the system. Okay, then you have a decomposers or the transformers. These are the wonderful biodegraders or the biological engineers. These include the fungi and bacteria. They decompose the dead remains of the producers and consumers and convert the complex organic systems into complex compounds. See, when you talk about solid waste management, if you see the Indian waste, 70% is organic fraction. If you convert that organic fraction, you have the valuable products like manure or the biogas. When you look at manure or biogas, what essentially is that is the complex organic substance or converted into simpler gaseous compound. That's where you have the biogas. That is where you see that methanogenic bacteria, etc., would have played or a fungi has played a role in converting that, synthesizing that organic substance into the final product. Even the manure is also a similar thing. Okay. Then we have the abiotic component in ecosystem. You have biotic and abiotic. Abiotic component of ecosystem include basic inorganic elements and compounds such as soil, water, oxygen, calcium, carbonate, phosphorus, and variety of organic compounds. The amount of living and non-living components like calcium, phosphorus, and nitrogen present at any given time in known as a standing state. So now you need to know that what is a standing state. So that is the amount of non-living components like calcium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. These are the micro and trace elements in the system. They decide the standing state of a region. Okay. Now we also understood the biogeochemical cycle, the nutrient cycle. Nutrients are atoms and molecules that are essential for the growth of plants and trees. Different nutrients are important to different chemical processes within the and between the plant cell. Plants to make protein, DNA, and many other molecules, for example, use nitrogen. So that is where you see that role of nitrogen in the system and maintaining the nitrogen balance in the system. When you eat the food, essentially you are consuming the nitrogen. That is what happens. That's where sometime when you are advised to take pulses, that means you are taking the nitrogen rich this one which helps in building the many other molecules in the body. Okay, the cycling ensures that nutrients don't get stuck somewhere in the soil. So that is how it maintains the balance in the system. The main nutrient cycles are and several factors disrupt the nutrient cycle. This I have talked about it. I had talked about the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, sulfur cycle, etc. And the human action often disrupts these nutrient cycles. Okay. So now biological production and energy flow. Let us look at the productivity and production aspect of the ecosystem. Biological production involves the capture of usable energy, and the production of organic compounds in which the energy is stored. This includes all living things plus all products of living things. There are three measures of production, that is the biomass, energy content and carbon content. Depending on the kind of the thing, you have these terminologies: biomass, the amount of plant material that is there; energy content, you talk about when you burn that biomass, you have the heat generated. That is where you talk about calorific value or the megajoules, etc. Then also other one is the carbon content. You say that it stores this many the tons of carbon. 1 hectare of this one has 6 to 9 tons of carbon. Okay, biomass is usually measured as the amount of total organic matter per unit surface of the earth. For example, gram per meter square or metric ton per hectare or MT per hectare. For example, if you take a grassland, what do you do to find out the biomass? You will harvest the grass in a 1 meter by 1 meter plot, and then measure the quantity. That gives the grams per meter square. That gives the biomass or productivity of that particular grassland. Similarly, when you talk about the trees, say you will measure the girth and height of a tree, and you will find out how many trees are there. Then you also measure when you measure the girth and height of a tree, you can find out the biomass of a tree multiplied by the biomass of an individual tree multiplied by a number of trees in the region gives the biomass of the total region. These are all the terminologies used to find out the health of the ecosystem or the health of the region. For example, when you measure your weight, okay, you are getting an idea whether you are obese or whether you are weak. That kind of idea you will get it. And also change in biomass over a given period is called the net production. There are 3 steps of production of biomass, and it's used as a source of energy by the autotrophs. You have gross and net production. First, an organism produces organic matter within its body. Next, it uses some of this new organic matter as a fuel in respiration. Finally, some of the newly produced organic matter is stored for the future production. That's where the net production is equal to gross production minus respiration. See, when you take a food, you are converting that organic matter that is assimilated by your body. Then part of it is used for the doing the job of respiration, etc. And part of it gets stored in the system, that is the net production. So that is where when you measure the weight of your body or weight of a organism or weight of a plant, you are measuring the net production, which is a gross production minus respiration. Net production of the tree is energy contained in what is left at the end of the year and includes the new wood laid down in the trunk, new bud that will develop and leaves and flowers in the next year, and new roots. So now let's look at the energy in the ecological system. Organisms, ecosystem, and the entire biosphere possess the essential thermodynamic characteristics. They can create and maintain a high state of internal order or a condition of low entropy, that is a low amount of disorder or unavailable energy in the system. So now when you look at that, is what I was highlighting, that an ecosystem, when you look at it carefully, you can also understand the thermodynamic principle. There is a process of energy transfer, material transfer. There is also the phenomena of optimization and process of the entropy also. The ecosystem and organisms are accordingly open, non-equilibrium thermodynamic system that exchange energy and matter with the environment continuously to decrease internal but increase the external entropy. Now, the energy flow is the movement of energy through an ecosystem from the external environment through a series of organisms back to the external environment. You understood when I showed the food chain, there is a solar energy that is from the external environment, organism converts into food, and there is a synthesis and the transfer from one level to the other, and it gets back to the environment in the form of carbon, etc. Okay, so maybe that figure in the book, you can look at it. The figure illustrates the energy flow within the ecosystem. Now let's look at the equations that we use for the production of biomass and energy flow. The general relationship is between the biomass and net production is B2 is equal to B1 plus NP. B2 is the biomass at the end of the time period. B1 is the amount of the biomass at the beginning of the time period. NP is the change of biomass during the time period. Suppose if you have taken the weight of yourself the previous year, and if you have found out your weight the current year, then you will come to know how much this one you have added. That gives the net change in biomass during the time period. So that means similarly in the plants also we do the similar thing. So by measuring the girth, there's an increase in the girth of a tree over a period of time. That indicates the how much the biomass has changed over a period of time. So that gives, if you do the measurement on an annual basis, you can also find out the biomass productivity per year. And also that indirectly gives the how much carbon is taken out from the system, okay, from the system. So the GP is equal to NP plus R, or NP is equal to GP minus R. NP is the net production, GP is the gross production, R is the respiration. There is an example in the book, you can read up that. I have given the certain example. Depending on the trophic level, what is the kind of the energy that you uses, okay. Now to summarize what for an ecosystem, you have the biotic and abiotic component. Biotic component has the various levels, the producer, consumers, and decomposers. Maintaining the balance among this will maintain the integrity of the biotic system. Similarly, abiotic component have the climatic, inorganic, and organic component. Climatic include the solar, temperature, current, then the wind, while the oxygen, etc. Then the organics include the protein, then the carbohydrate, lipid, etc. These are the outcome of this inorganic compound, which decides the ecosystem structure. That's where when you look at a particular landscape, it has a particular ecosystem structure. Depending on the ecosystem structure, you have the species composition. Based on that, you have the functions associated with that. That means function of an ecosystem depends on the species composition, which in turn depend on the ecosystem structure. That's when maintaining the integrity of the ecosystem or the integrity of the landscape is very crucial to maintain the balance in the system. Okay. Now, with this, I'll take a small break. I'll ask someone to summarize what I said so far. So, can someone summarize? Should I choose a person, or you will do it voluntarily? Maybe we'll have voluntary this one, so that in case if there are some passive people, I might ask them to respond later. Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So summarize which part? Like
Whatever I said after the break, no? I've given a break between 10:30 plus, okay, till 10:55. So after the break, 10:55, you can talk about it, okay? I talked about the food chain, food web, and all those things, biomes, and then I talked about how to quantify the elemental ratios, all those things, okay? What happened? I'm not hearing any voice.
sir, can I try?
Yeah, please do that.
Sir, I'll start from ecosystem part.
Yeah.
An ecosystem is a system which consists of biological community that occurs in some local and physical as well as chemical factors that make up its living, non-living, or biotic or abiotic environment. And energy transformation and biochemical cycling are the main reasons due to which comprise the ecosystem's ecology. Um, there are different types of different type of cycles in the system, such as carbon cycle, ozone cycle, nitrogen cycle, sulfur cycle, and phosphorus cycle. Uh, Carbon cycle is one of the simplest of all the cycles, which is the rotation of carbon dioxide from carbon components from living biotic organism to non-living abiotic organisms, from animals or plants to soil and throughout the atmosphere. Ozone cycle, nitrogen cycle, and phosphorus or sulfur cycle also follow the same pattern. The principles and tools that we use that we can use can be broken down into three major components, such as element ratio, mass balance, and element cycling. Element ratio is the ratio of the components of a particular living organism which are necessary for its sustainability or its living. We can use element ratio to know whether a particular organism is in proper healthy state. Mass balance is a is used to determine whether system is changing and how fast it is changing. So there are different types of different types of tropical levels, which can be further formed to food chains. Food chains are like food chains are just is a linear cycle, is a um, linear chain of organisms which consume each which consume an organism which is before itself. Many food chains together many food chains intermingled and together form a food web. Um, s-
Okay, Manav, now someone else can do it. Maybe Raj Aditya can summarize now. Raj,
Thank you.
Sir, I'm online. Yes, sir. Sir, hello.
you are not
Sir,
audible. Can you speak bit louder?
Sir, I'm audible.
Continue.
Sir, ecosystems classified into heterotrophs and autotrophs, sir. Sir, again, biotic and abiotic components are its classifications. And in a biotic components, we have producers, consumers, and again, we have producers, consumers, and derivatives, and sources of hello. Hello.
Yeah, please continue.
Sir, for again we have seen about food chains, food webs, and tropical levels, sir. Then we have nutrient cycles, sir. We have seen about nutrient cycles. Then we have seen about.
Excuse me, sir.
Please do that.
Yes, sir. So you have explained the process of ecosystem to us. And after that, we have studied structure of ecosystem. And then we came to the definition of biogeochemical cycle. And then we studied different cycles like water cycle. Thereafter, we studied carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, then nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, sulfur cycle. And after that, we studied this energy flow within an ecosystem, how energy flows. And then you explained us the importance of conserving a tiger or a particular level of in the food chain. And thereafter, we studied the explanation of biomass, energy, and energy flow in detail with examples. And thereafter, we studied the trophic levels and the food chains and the different trophic levels in that food chain. And then we studied food web. And then biomes. We studied the definition and explanation of biomes and various examples of biomes. And then we studied the effect of ecosystem. And with various examples, this was explained. And then we studied the ecology and environment. And then further, the ecosystem concept was elaborated. And then the biotic and abiotic structures were explained. And then the nutrient cycle and the net production and how the net production is calculated with examples were studied. And thereafter, we had a look at the ecosystem components. Nice diagram. We understood this in the last. So all this we have studied today after the break. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I will take attendance now. I'll
Sir,
just
can I
call out
try-
a person. No,
Sir,
I'll just
can
take
I-
attendance. After that, you can come back. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Right.
Yeah, Ramesh, you just have to respond when I take attendance. Okay. Ramesh Tatla.
Yes, sir, I am present, sir.
Okay, can you introduce yourself? You missed the introductory session.
Yes, sir. Am I
You
audible,
need to
sir?
tell your qualification and where you are working and how this course will help you.
Yes, sir. Am I audible and visible, sir, now?
Yes, please continue.
Yes, sir. Very good afternoon to the respected sir and all the participants. I am Ramesh Satla. I am currently working in executive cadre as a manager in one of the PSU called ONGC Limited, Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited, which is a Maharatna company in exploring oil and gas. Presently, I am based in Assam Asset in the northeastern sector of India. And as you know that this Assam is a very diverse in terms of environment. Regarding to my qualifications, I did MSc in geophysics. Later on, after joining in ONGC, I did a management course also in the field of my present job. And I would like to do a research or a PhD in the field of environment. With that motive only, actually, when I come across with this IISc website, I saw this course and I thought that this course is more relevant and work as a foundation for me to learn very basic things in the field of environment. Since childhood, I am more concerned about the environment, which is taken me to walk towards this institute and to join in this course. And I thought this course may be helpful for me to further continue my passion towards the environment. And even I was writing a mail to Dr. TVRAMACHANDRA sir that how to pursue a PhD in IISc, being working in a government servant in PSU. And he was also very kind enough to giving replies to me. How to do the PhD, and more I am having more doubts on that also, that how do I pursue a PhD in IISc while working in ONGC also. Thank
Okay,
you, sir.
thank you. So I will take attendance now. Sandesh?
Yes, I am there, sir.
Okay, Mahesh?
Yes, sir. I am there.
Okay. Kaivalya?
Present, sir.
And there is a?
Present, sir.
I heard
Yeah.
Kaivalya, now I called Andheri. Okay.
Yeah, sir, it's Andrew. Yeah, present.
Then Raj Aditya?
Yes, sir, present.
Nayana?
Present, sir.
Shampi Chanda?
Present, sir.
Atanu Ghosh?
Present, sir.
Gajanan Hegde?
Sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Gajanan, you were
Yes, sir.
not
Yes.
there in the morning. I would
Yeah.
appreciate
I got some trouble with this Zoom app.
Oh, I see. Can you
Yeah.
introduce yourself, Gajanan? Because you were not there when we had the introductory round.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. Yeah. I missed the half an hour session, I think.
Yeah.
So then I log in through mobile. Now it's okay. My laptop is working.
Yeah, please introduce yourself. You give your background, where you are working, and what is your expectation as far as this course is concerned.
Yes, sir. I'm Gajanan Hegde. I'm right now I am working in Indian Institute for Human Settlements as a senior associate. So I am handling here environmental lab. Here we are doing water and this soil testing. So I think this course will be helpful to uptake my work here. So related to water and soil analysis. So hello.
Okay. Now I'll move or continue in the attendance. Anita?
I'm present, sir.
Prasanna? Prasanna?
Yes, sir.
Vicky?
I'm present.
Vicky Agarwal?
Present, sir.
Uma? Datta Uma? Okay, Revati? Mana?
Present, sir.
Avani? Avani? Okay, Aishwarya?
Present, sir.
Avani. Aishwarya.
Present, sir.
Avani? Okay, fine. Let's continue. You know, the attendance is mandatory. It will carry the marks. You will not know when I will take attendance. So I appreciate if you all continue
Sir.
like in a classroom session. Okay.
Okay. Sir, can I try to summarize the before session?
Yeah, before that, I will just ask attendance. Uma. Uma, can you introduce yourself?
Sir, she has dropped a message in the chat saying that there is some issue with her mic. So,
Yeah, I know. I saw that. That is where I thought she has sorted out. So, okay. Uma, you are from a organization. Probably you should be able to sort out this issue, unlike others who depend on mobile. Please do it by lunchtime, okay? Yeah, please summarize.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can I summarize?
Yeah.
Means whatever the things I remember.
No?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
Okay, sir. First, you explain the ecosystem. Then you explain the components of ecosystem. There are mainly classified into two: abiotic and biotic. And in abiotic, there are sunlight, wind, and these are all the temperature factors. Yes. And in biotic components, all the kind of living organisms. Then you explain the different kind of cycles like carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, and how we have misunderstood it. In water cycle, you have explained the concept of vegetation and the different kind of vegetation. Like if we use different kind of vegetation in a particular area of land, it will help it will give different kind of microorganisms present the soil, which will help the soil to percolate. Means it will help the soil to become permeable, so that when the water comes, it will go to directly to the ground level, and it will store, and then it will help to go to the water side. Similarly, you explain the nitrogen cycle and oxygen cycle, and uh, how the in carbon cycle and nitrogen different elements goes from one sphere like atmosphere, from lithosphere to hydrosphere to like that. Then you explain different autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs are the one who are also known as the producer, which can produce their own foods, which are not independent to others for their foods, and heterotrophs are the one who are dependent on others for their foods, like uh, fox, human beings, and other animals. After uh, after that, you you explain the transmission of energy from one level to another level, and there is a loss of energy in between that, like loss of heat, like from sun to plants to herbivorous to carnivorous, like that. When we consume food or things, there is a loss of energy, somewhat between 10% in between. This is kind of law of thermodynamics. And sir, that is all I remember.
Okay, thank you. I'll proceed further now. We'll talk about food chain, food web, and trophic level. I'm just summarizing what I said so far. We
Yes, sir.
understood when we look at the food chain, we are essentially talking about transfer of food energy from the source in autotroph through a series of organisms and consume and are consumed is called a food chain. There are two kinds of food chain, grazing food chain, and also we have a detritus food chain. So
So few doubts can I ask on in the previous one?
Yeah, the green plants that occupy the first trophic level, herbivore, and second trophic level is the primary consumer level. Then we have primary carnivore, the third level. Then secondary carnivore, the fourth level, that is the tertiary consumer level. The energy flow through a trophic level equals the total assimilation at that level, which in turn equals the production of biomass and organic matter plus respiration. That is where we said NP is equal to GP minus R. Gross production minus respiration is the net production. So now, when you look at the trophic level, is the functional position of an organism in the food web. It is possible to assign the trophic level at each species based on the feeding habits. For example, if you look at the oil sardine, it consumes 80% of the phytoplankton, that is at the producer level, 1, then 20% of zooplankton. Then its status in the trophic level is given as 1 plus 0.8 into 1 plus 0.2 into 2, that is 2.2. Similarly, if you look at tuna, it consumes 50% of mid-level and 50% of highest level carnivores. Then the level is given as the trophic level is given as 3.8. Based on your food habit, you can also compute your own the level in the trophic level. Okay, in the trophic. Now, when you look at the trophic structure, whether it's a marine or in a reason, you have the plants and detritus at their bottom, then herbivores, then you have mid-level carnivore, high-level carnivore, and top-level carnivore. Suppose if you are talking about conserving a particular taxa, you need to know this food chain so that, you know, to have this conservation, you need to maintain this entire habitat of that system. Now, if you disturb and if there is a hope, is there a hope? We'll try to discuss that. Restoration and recovery. How ecosystem restore to disturbance. There were some questions. Who was that? Can you ask that question? Okay, I'll proceed further. Maybe you can come back after some time. Studying the pattern of the change. Who was that? Studying the pattern of the change in ecosystem is the response to natural or human disturbance is an important tool for learning how to restore lands damaged by people. So that's where, you know, the landscape level, you need to understand what are the external pressures and also what was the condition earlier. Then with that, you should be able to restore the lands which are damaged because of our action. Let us also look at the ecological succession. The disturbance of natural areas are not always or even usually human induced. Natural disturbance such as storms and fires have always been a part of the environment. There are some the destruction because of that natural phenomena also. So such disturbances have existed for so long that animals and plants have adapted to them, and to such an extent that the landscape actually benefits in the long run. There are two kinds of succession. That is, one is the primary succession, is the initial establishment and development of an ecosystem. Then secondary succession is a re-establishment of an ecosystem. See, you would have removed the vegetation. See, earlier we had a slash and burn cultivation, wherein you know, the people who are moving from one region to other region, they used to burn the forest and cultivate in the region. Then when that region become unproductive, they used to move to the next region, and that's how they used to practice the slash and burn cultivation. And in that process, there's a huge the forest areas got degraded. Then with independence, then there was a ban on that slash and burn cultivation. Then we noticed that initially in those degraded ecosystem, we saw the primary succession that some grasses and small shrubs started appearing. Then with those grasses and herbs, we saw that animals which disperse the seeds started coming to that region. With that, the disposal of seeds and all happened. Then now after 35 or 40, after 65 or 70 years, we see that the original ecosystem is re-established. This is in certain regions in Western Ghats where my colleagues have done the doctoral work. Okay, now to understand
sir, I
this,
have a question.
Yeah.
From the previous slide. So the previous slide that you just discussed, is it the same as what happens in Northeast as jhum cultivation?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That is also
Jhum cultivation,
jhum
right?
cultivation is also that in all part of India except Northeast, that practice is the banned actually.
Yeah. Okay, sir, sorry, continue.
So you continue, no problem.
Yeah. So what I was asking was, if we are degrading land by burning the land, right? And you, as you said, in some parts of Western Ghat, they have regenerated. Is it possible? Is the same thing possible when desertification of land happens over a period of time? It is able to regenerate itself.
Well, if you allow the system to recover, yes, it will recover. For example, in Kolar district, through some of the hardy species which can get adapted to that desert kind of degraded environment, then after 15 years, we saw that natural system thriving there. See, what happens with the desertification, you would have lost the organic material, organic content in the soil. That is the top layer in the soil, which are the productive, which has the nutrients, which would have got they exposed and which would have got removed from the system with the rain, etc. If you can establish that organic content in the system, then the life will start thriving in that region. That's what we notice. And also you can get back the biodiversity also in the region. For example, in the Western Ghats, way back in 90s, there was a degraded sacred grove. You understand what a sacred grove? These are patch of forest which are protected by our elders, understanding the relationship between the water and the vegetation to ensure sustainability of water. The patch of forest were they're protected in the name of God or in the name of demon. Now, in that one of the sacred grove, we noticed that there's a large scale degradation has happened because of the human intervention, the anthropogenic intervention in the form of grazing, then cutting of trees, etc. What we did there in 90s is we just fenced the region. Then over a 3 decades, when one of my students did the study in that region, we noticed that earlier, when it is a degraded patch, there were about 32 species were there. Today in that same region, we see about 68 species. That means if you curtail the external pressure, there is a hope of recovery of the system. That's what that experiment shows. To summarize what you said, yes, degraded landscape, provided we understand the landscape, the original condition, if you can restore that, we can get back the ecosystem in the region. It is possible.
Okay. Is the same thing happening in Chernobyl as well, where the land had degraded, now wildlife has started
we will
coming back?
get into that. Anyway, we have a person who had worked in the atomic this one.
Okay.
So probably when we give him a platform at later stage, he might
Sure,
share
sir.
the thing. Because those are, when we talk about radiation and all those things, hazardness also you should keep in mind. It takes longer time to get out of the system. That is where that is slightly a difficult process. But see, there is always a hope in the system. You can plant the species which can get adapted to the radiation and then eventually remove the radiation. But only the thing is, make sure that plants do not get into our food system. Okay. Now let's look at the primary succession. See, this is an example of primary succession where a plant community has been developed in a sand dune surface having no prior plant or animal community. You can see that gradually the plant community has taken over the okay. Then the next one is the Indiana Dunes or Lake Michigan, which simulated the cause development of a series of ecological succession. Then the similar thing I explained in the Western Ghats, okay. So wherein the degraded landscape slowly getting over. This is, you see that the small shrubs and the grasses appearing in the region. Then you will see that the trees start the colonizing in the region. Okay. Now let's look at the effect of imbalance in the ecosystem. In most cases, a habitat is in place with the right number of producers, herbivores and carnivores, which keeps it going. However, if changes are introduced like habitat destruction, new predators or removal of predators, and environment is thrown out of the balance, that is where, unplanned intervention in our system always introduces imbalance in the system. That is where the bureaucracy and the current engineers have to be educated on this aspect. Even though they have the degrees and capability to manage the current profession, unless they understand the ecosystem and ecosystem functioning, they will not be a good managers of the system. That is where they threaten the sustainability of resources, which affects the next generation. This will lead to an exponential decrease in the population ecosystem that will cause a high extinction rate of biodiversity. That's what in some parts of the country we see the degradations happening. And of course, then the government will come up with the restoration and rejuvenation packages. The next impact will be the imbalance in the ratio of producers, consumers, and decomposers in the ecology system, which consequently distorts the pattern of energy flow through the chain of web and leads to the species extinction. I gave an example of a tiger, the linkage with the water, and also removal of the some of the taxa will introduce the imbalance in the system. So that is where we see that that lead to the extinction of the species. Suppose if you are talking about conserving a biotic component also and biotic interaction, then only you can restore the ecosystem. Now, if there is an imbalance in the ecosystem, how it affects the system, let us try to understand that. Okay, the natural uneventful ecosystem is dynamic and attains its steady state or equilibrium through the hemostatic mechanism with the proportion. Nature is always in number of population, they which will lead to the ecological imbalance and high extinction rate of biodiversity. The evidence of imbalances can be seen through the disruption of food web, food chain, food pyramid, because they maintain the balance in the system by proper flow of energy. When pyramid is disrupted, insufficient consumption of food leads to the extinction of particular species. So you would have seen in the press in the last about 10 days back, the vice president of this country was talking about river linking. So unfortunately, people do not understand the implication of this kind of large-scale project. They come up with the thing because they are advised by a group of fellows who have the vested interest. Now, suppose if the river, the linking is implemented in the country, what would happen? If you look at the thing, the species that are in Ganga, which are native species of the Ganga, when you river, you know, those species of exotic species scale, you know, the food requirement, which introduces the, you know, the profuse growth of this invasive species, because these alien species or exotic species will become the invasive, which will lead to the insufficient food for the native species, lead to the disruption in the food chain, leading to the loss of biodiversity in the system. That's where when we take up the large scale project, we need to be sensible and responsible. So just because we are in a higher position, we cannot come up with the crazy ideas of river linking, etc. Now, the ecological pyramid, as you looked at it, I have talked about the energy transfer. When you look at each level, what is the kind of the say, for example, if you see the tertiary consumers, if they require 10 joule of energy, they should consume the resources worth 100 joules. That means 10% of that is being used for the respiration, etc. Similarly, if the secondary consumer has to survive, they have to eat the primary consumers of 1000 joules to sustain 100 joules of energy. You know, that means at every level, there's a 10% loss of energy. You need to account that when you talk about rejuvenation or rehabilitating the ecosystem. So then, you know, as you move from one level to the other level, the total biomass tend to decrease from the base to the top. The energy availability at each successive high trophic level also decreases. So now that is the one. You see that as it goes, the energy gets concentrated. So that's where when you eat the meat, probably you are getting a high-end energy, but to sustain that high-end energy, that organism would have required the larger proportion of the green plant, etc. So now if you introduce the imbalance in the system, what will happen? Let us try to understand. This gives a food chain in aquatic ecosystem. You have the algae, zooplankton, small fish and the large fish. Now when you introduce a pollutant into the system, probably the algae population would have decreased. When algae declines, since there is not enough food, the zooplankton population comes down. Since zooplanktons are not available and algae is not available, small fish cannot thrive. So then, you know, the large fish also cannot thrive. That means by polluting the environment, the humans stop getting the food. This is what the imbalance which is introduced in the system you need to understand. Suppose if you have introduced you have become aggressive, you have introduced the small fishes in the system, which are higher than the carrying capacity of the system. Then, because of the higher proportion of smaller fish, you see the zooplankton population has come down. And because of removal of zooplankton, since there is no predation, the algae population has gone up. This also introduces the imbalance of system. Finally, you will not have the food. The large fish is not available. Okay, the third example is you have introduced some pollutant. In that, you see that native species of fish, smaller fishes have disappeared, like river linking thing. Now, implication of that is even the large fish has disappeared because there is no food available. Now, because of absence of small fish, you see the zooplankton has gone up. So, because of too much of predation, you see the algae population has come down. This all shows how the imbalances lead to the loss of food in the system. The humans lose the food. The food in the form of fish availability is lost because of our mismanagement. That is what, when bureaucracy mismanage the system, they would have looted the natural resources. They would have taken the resources home, but in the process, they would have deprived the common man the right to live in the form of absence of fish in the system. Now, how do you manage it? With all those imbalances, understanding the ecosystem, there are tools to this one. For example, environmental assessment will give the condition of the thing. Then economic assessment, usually through cost benefit analysis, give the significance of the system, because today the system wants to know what is beneficial, because everyone think about GDP, where distort the ecosystem, and then which will hamper the thing. That is where GDP and the cost benefit analysis people have to understand. Then how to do the impact assessment is another tool. Then environmental auditing, which I talked about, is a mandatory in the industry. This is the next two. Then waste minimization program or environmental management systems is another two. Then life cycle assessment of a product or the environmental friendly design. These are all some of the management tools. In the subsequent chapter, we will take up each of these things and deliberate in detail. Okay, now let us understand who are the people or the participants in environmental management. Just give me 10 minutes. The groups involved in the environment and development are people or government who are uninformed of the implication of development or are unable adequately to voice their views and affect the change. See, that is what happens. Sometimes people who are uninformed, uneducated, are environmentally illiterate. When they are in the government, when they take the decision, we see that there are problems in the system. Then we have the next group: consultants, scientists, economists, and bankers who went upon the riches are blinkered by concern for sovereignty, religion, or national security. These are the other group. Okay. Then existing users, those using the environment or resources, usually the local people who have their right and develop management skills. So then we have the group seeking change with a little control, like public facilitators and controllers. Controllers could be regulatory agencies also. So now we will look at this aspect in greater detail. Existing users. This category refers to those who use land or other resources, and those using the environment or resources usually evolve rights and develop the management skills. Now, when you go to the villages, you have the village the community committees are there. The way they manage the natural resources is much superior than the people who are graduated and take up the government job and manage the resources. This category faces a problem due to incoming migrants and settlers and urban elites and powerful commercial organizations. That is what happens with some of the unplanned projects. Then let us try to see that what are the initiatives we have taken up. During 1975 to 85, UN Decade for Women has set up different programs to know the role of women in environmental management, women, environment and development, which focuses women as having the special relationship with the environment as its users and managers. Then gender and development. Then we have the third program, Women in Development, which focuses on reason for women's exclusion on marginalization from decision making and receipt of the benefit of the development. Now, when you look at in Afghanistan, in the current scenario, these so-called cruel Talibanis are trying to keep the women out of the administration or the management. That is deliberately, by keeping the women, they can loot the resources. Whereas the women who are in the administration or in the the management would have the help in the sustainable management or the prudent management of the natural resources. Deliberately to loot the resources, one section of the society, the keep the women out of the system. Okay, then we have the next group seeking the change. This group consists of government, then commerce, individuals, international agencies, NGOs, media, academics, etc. All these groups, they are prone to the briefcase syndrome. That is where, they come up with the unrealistic project sometimes. Sometimes with the, most of the time they would have come with the realistic project required for the society. But sometimes when the briefcase syndrome is there, then we see the imbalances happening in the system. Okay. Then groups with a little control, this category consists of the poor with no option but to overexploit what is available without investing in improvement. This includes refugees, migrants, relocators, eco-refugees, workers in industry or mining, etc. Then we have the public. This category consists of people who wish to change, develop and conserve. Now with the, if you see in Bangalore, there are a group of youngsters who have emerged. They have become the eco warriors. Now they are taken up the cause for conserving the lakes and trees in Bangalore, because already we have reached the catastrophic situation. Now because of this group, I am hoping that there is a rejuvenation of the system in Bangalore. Then advantages of public participation in environment management. That I have been emphasizing that public has to be the active partner in any of these the ecological decision. The public may be able to provide advice and management considering the local condition, because they are will have the local ideas. They are better informed of the local conditions. So having consultation of the public while implementing a project is always better. But bureaucracy is of the colonial mindset, which often ignores that important component. Okay, when I give the case study of environmental impact assessment, I will also highlight how my study was benefited by interacting with the local people. We could come up with the project which has a developmental agenda. At the same time, we also ensure the conservation. That is because of the input given by the public. So now, often planning and management should be more accountable and more careful. Fears and opposition to management may be reduced if people are informed. Once you inform the people, once people's suggestions are implemented, you will have the least the resistance for the project. The communication gap between the experts and locals can be reduced by involving the public in the decision making. Okay. Now let's look at the next category, the facilitator. This category consists of funding agencies, consultants, planners, workers, including migrants affected by the health and safety issues, etc. Then we have the controllers. This category consists of government and international agencies, planners, law, consumer protection bodies, and NGOs, including various green or environmental bodies, trade organizations, media, concerned individuals, academics, global opinion, and environmental managers. That means the entire spectrum of all the professions are the part of this system. Okay. Then the overall, the environmental managers are the key to the major development. Their role includes the lobbying at national and international meetings, media campaigning, fundraising, conservation, environmental education, researching for eco-friendly process to fight for the rights. Of course, if you look at in our country, there is a mushrooming of the non-governmental organization. 60 to 70% are corrupt. That is where we have a problem in the environmental conservation. But because of that remaining 20 or 30% who are sincere, we see some changes happening in the system because they are actively involved in environmental conservation, media campaigning, etc. Now let's look at the last component of this chapter, that is the ethics and the environment. We all, if you look at our roots, so we had our close symbiotic relationship with the nature. Probably when you are in the village or rural area, your elders would have told you about that relationship with the nature. But when you came to the urban area, you have become irresponsible, because the day when you look at the other aspects in the life, you started looking at the nature in a different way. So when you look at the ethics and the environment, there are both practical and moral reasons for placing a value on the environment. There are 4 categories of justification: utilitarian, ecological, aesthetic, and moral. See, when you look at these categories of justification of the environment, everyone has to get the resources. For that, you need to maintain the ecological integrity. And also when there is a integrity in terms of aesthetic, it provides the recreation benefits, and of course the moral the concept also is there. The major factor that necessitates the environmental ethics are, see, the one new effect on nature, our modern technological civilization affecting the nature, then the new knowledge of nature, understanding how we have changed the nature, the like greenhouse effect, etc. Then less knowledge of our nature, future effect of the present day activity, that the kind of project we propose and what kind of technology we use. See, we allow the dumping of hazardous material just because that country pays us. For example, if you look at 9/11, whatever the tragedy happened in US, the waste that is, whatever the debris that has come to the Bangalore, to protect that region, we have the police, the force, the CSF force guarding that region. First of all, we need to understand why we get the hazardous material. Just because those countries gave us a small penny of money, we have accepted that the hazardous material, and we have made our country the source or the hotspot for those hazardous materials. Then expanding the moral concerns is the other need of the environment. It is argued that even plants, animals, trees, and rocks have the moral and legal rights. We need to understand that is where when you go to the Rajasthan, you will see a community protecting a patch of forest to protect a particular tax of animals. Or if you go to the other part, you know that there was a famous hunting case, how the one of the film actors had to pay a heavy price for hunting that taxa when people went to the court. Okay, then we have there are the areas of environmental concern. The areas usually dealt within the context of environmental ethics or the environmental protection, animal protection, nature conservation. I would advise you to go through the content of this in the textbook. I have discussed that by citing the literatures also. So, okay, now let us try to understand how we started the whole thing. Okay, an intellectual climate had developed in the late 60s in large part because of the publication of the two papers. The first one is the historical roots of our ecological crisis. Then, the tragedy of the commons also gave us this one idea about how the common lands are mismanaged by the system for their own benefit. For example, if you go to the villages, there is a common land in the form of gomala, which are grazing land, or the lake. These are all the common land that is meant for the community's benefit. But unfortunately, the intellectual section of society mismanaging this common land will deprive the local people the right to graze or right to get the water. Okay, then you have the other publications also, like Richard Routley presented a paper in the 15th Congress. Is there a need for a new environmental ethics? Like that, there are various publications are there. You can see even our writings also, which are available online. Okay, then let us look at the environmental concerns in the various parts of the globe. The first period of raised environmental consciousness has started in 1900. The most influential environmentalists of that decade, the founders of the American Sierra Club and other environmental organizations. See, that is the period the degradation of the environment happened in the country. That is where people understood the implications of that. That is where they started talking about the likely implication if you continue the thing. See, all these damages have happened in the countries like in the West. We should have taken the lesson from that before we get into the degrading the environment in our country. The second period of the rise environmental consciousness happened during 1960 to 73. It was the result of Silent Spring, where Rachel Carson talked about the implications of the pesticide, the contaminant getting into the food chain. I talked about the kidney failure or the cancer increasing in Bangalore, which is because of the mismanaging the industrial effluent and the sewage in the city. Like this book has published even before I took a birth on this earth. So, but unfortunately, we have not understood the importance of maintaining the environmental integrity. Environmental integrity means not altering the quality of the environment. Okay. Then the third period of environmental consciousness was during 87 to 93. You see that the Norwegian Prime Minister, the Miss Brundtland, came up with the publication called Our Common Future. So wherein she argued sustainable development, sustainability aspect, sustainable production, etc. That is where we talked about it. But whatever we discussed, so during 80s and 90s, of course, we have forgotten now. Now our agenda is to take the country to the $5 trillion economy, loot all our resources, make our country poor of the natural resources as the time progresses. Okay, there are these are the some summaries of the international environmental movement. You have the silent spring, then global warming alarm in 60s, the environmental conferences during 70s and 60s, the White House Conference on Natural Beauty in 65. Then you have the World Conservation Union was set up in 1948. The environmental impact assessment, the first time it was talked about in US, the NEPA came up with that. Then in 90s, the Indian government also started implementing. And of course, there are some dilution in the EIA in the recent time. Then it progresses. You can read up this thing, like how the World Fund, etc., came up with the thing. Okay. So then let us conclude this chapter by understanding the environmental concerns in India. We can categorize the environmental concerns in India as those arising from negative effects of the very process of development and conditions of poverty and underdevelopment. The major problems that encompass the area of environmental management are in India. One is the population pressure and urbanization, then degradation of the land resources, the water scarcity and pollution. See, we have a very ambitious program of Jal Nal. That means having a tap at every house. But if we don't have water itself, then what will we carry through this null? So that is what we need to understand. Our focus should have been on sustaining the water than on this one. See, the demand side might give the vote, but we need to sustain the resources to make sure the demand side is the successful program. Then depleting energy sources, air pollution, intensive agriculture, loss of biodiversity. These are the various concerns that are there. And the end, the diseases. We have been talking about the diseases. Today, the entire globe has faced the pandemic in the form of COVID. COVID is a clear indication of mismanagement of nature. When we mismanage the wildlife, naturally the virus associated with that has got into the human. To understand this further, you can come to the Karnataka. We have a disease called monkey fever. The monkey fever is a disease passed through the monkey to the human. Why did the monkey started interacting with the human? If you look at it, monkeys were deprived of their food and water through the deforestation in the region. For example, in Western Ghats region, especially Uttara Kannada and Shimoga region, the forest which had native species of plant which used to give the flower and fruit to the monkey were removed and converted into monoculture plantation of rubber or acacia. In that process, monkey didn't have the flower or fruit or a water. Then monkeys started coming to the human habitation in search of food and water. When the monkeys came to the human habitation, the ticks on monkey's body, which was carrying this virus, the monkey fever virus, so got detached from the monkey and started biting the human. So in the process, the virus got transferred from the ticks to the human. And then every year, there has been, in the last 10 or 15 years, when I did a study in this region, I see at least 200 to 300 people are dying because of the monkey fever. Now the global, the pandemic, the corona has removed few lakhs of people. When will our citizens wake up? When will they start questioning the irrational decision of hurting the ecosystem and the nature? So now the vehicular pollution is another major concern. In the cities where the public transport is very weak, you see the higher proportion of the emission from the transportation sector. For example, Bangalore and Hyderabad, where public transport is weak, where too much of private vehicles are being used, you see 54% of the emissions are from the transportation sector in Hyderabad and 45% is from the transportation sector in Bangalore. The people who talk about mitigating the emission, they should improve the public transport in these cities. Then, of course, we saw that in the high intensity rainfall in many parts of the country, the rain which is supposed to spread over the 4 months, if it comes in a month or a few days, then naturally the flooding happens. As it happening in the cities like the Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore, or even in the district like the whether Wayanad in Kerala or Kodagu in the Karnataka. This all indicates that we are mismanaging the forest, etc. Okay, then of course, if you look at the grain, food grain production, the currently is about 310 million tons. This is the latest data, and which we expect it will go up to 350 million tons. So that means our requirement for the land is increasing. At the same time, we are not maintaining the integrity of the land. That is where the productivity of the land also is coming down. The next concern is the waste management or the waste mismanagement. I'm talking about solid and liquid waste that is being generated in the country. In addition to that, there are a bunch of people who are useless in the system. That management also we need to do that. Okay. India spends a sizable portion of the revenue on health problem. In the major 36 major cities in India, our expenditure on health is about 9,000 to 12,000 crores per year. Now with the COVID, that has gone to the lakhs. Okay. So now some of the concern what I have raised, I will just summarize. One is the population. In the next decade, we are, by 2050, we are likely to take over the China in terms of the population. Then land degradation, we are degrading the land. This is one of the major concerns which are going to hurt the Indian population. Indian population will not have the water or the food. So these are some of the glimpses of the deforestation happening in the region. You can see the shola forest being degraded. Then hunting was there. Now only some Khans do the hunting. They have been handled by the awakened society or the awakened youngsters in the region. Okay, these are the other this one. The aquaculture. Introducing the large-scale monoculture in ecologically sensitive region also is degrading the ecosystem. Then air pollution in India, we have not understood why the pollution happens, what are the implications. We need to do that. Now, if you look at Delhi and other cities, there's already a concern towards the higher amount of pollutants in the air. Of course, even in Bangalore, we see that. Then water pollution, our engineers have not understood how to manage the water through the wastewater treatment. They always take up the easy part of linking the untreated sewage into the river or into the lake. That is where they are contaminating the environment. We need to make the bureaucracy and engineers accountable. Probably with that, we can improve the situation in the country. Okay. Then poor management of solid waste, you would have seen now with the increase in the irresponsible citizens, we see the large proportion of the plastic getting into the system, which is happening in cities like Bangalore, the Hyderabad, Mumbai, etc. So in summary, we provided an overview of the environmental management and pointed out that it is an extensive but loosely defined field. We also understood the ecosystem and we outlined that need for ecosystem approach in environmental management, types of management processes and tools, and the responsibilities of professionals. Then the understanding of the concerns and initiative led to the evolution of various approaches, including the ecosystem approach. When I take up the case study on the ecosystem approach, you will understand the linkages between the vegetation and water availability. And also in this chapter, we discuss the various issues related to the environmental concerns and ethics in the management of the environment. The today's major concern in the country is having the literate citizens. Though majority of the population can read and write, most of them are environmentally illiterate. This environmentally illiterate population in the decision making is creating a mess in our country. Finally, we presented the environmental concerns in India, hoping that we will change the system. With you acquiring the additional knowledge on this concept, probably when you become a decision maker, you might change the system. That's our hope. And in that direction, we have been working for a last 2 decades through this course.